Monday edition of BK and Ferrario, and no BK. For those of you that woke up early in the morning, you were graced by stepping into your vehicle and hearing the dulcet town sounds of
St.
BK.
Louis.
I know, yeah, not a way to start your morning. But we don't have BK today, but there is the A-team in the studio, which means it's T-Bone, it's Grant Francis, and I'm Alex Ferrario. After a Cardinals series loss against the Phillies, T-Bone, the streak has now officially been dead. There's no series win. There's no streak of series wins, but Cardinals are a playoff team. After laying an egg in 2 of 3 against the Philadelphia Phillies, and that first one on a Friday, all primetime games. You had a 4-2 final score, Saturday 6-1, and then, of course, the Cardinals do get that win last night in extras 5-4. While I'm watching that game this weekend, I really went into it with an open mind, thinking like, look, they've done everything they needed to do to prove to me that they've turned the train around. You know, the conductor hat that BK's wearing, choo-choo. They did everything to prove to me, like, hey, you need to be on board with this because the Cardinals have figured something out. But I wanted to see it against the top teams because for me, it's not just a matter of, oh, man, they could be a playoff team. It's exciting. Sure, you want playoffs. But I wanted to see, is there a ceiling with this team? And after 2 of 3 against Philadelphia, T-Bone and Grant, while watching it, I didn't find myself angry. I'm not going to come on the air and start screaming about this is why the Cardinals stink and they need to trade everybody. But I'm also not going to come on the air and celebrate that they won 1 of 3 like I know my guy BK did this morning. I think what they did for me over the weekend was clarified who they are. And I'm fine with it. I'm at peace with it. It's like when the girl cheats on you so many times, I'm at peace with it. You move on.
Exactly. And maybe move.
And probably move. You probably should move because she's got phone numbers, addresses, everything. This is who the Cardinals are. They are a team that still is in a playoff race because the National League is awful. They are a team that is going through injuries. Yeah, those guys aren't there and they could change things, but you're a team that can't beat the best teams. You are not a World Series contender, and I think we all knew that. You're not a bottom dweller. You're not a team that's going to be in the lottery again this year. You're right in the middle. And after showing against 2 of the really good pitchers for Philadelphia, and then you got Taijuan Walker yesterday that you kind of hit around, but you let them get back into the game, they clarified it for me. The Cardinals are this middling team. There's no more height. There's no more drop off. It's just right here in the middle.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I wasn't expecting anything from them this series because I felt like they were a team that was stuck in the middle of this muddy National League to where you have the Phillies and the Dodgers, who are really the 2 best teams in the NL. So winning 1 game and dropping 2 of 3, it wasn't really surprising to me. Now, that series for me felt like the good, the incomplete, and the ugly. And the good part for the Cardinals is their bullpen. Their bullpen was awesome in this series. There's no denying that. Their bullpen went 11 innings and allowed just 1 earned run and struck out 12. That's a .82 ERA. And you saw that bullpen going against that Phillies lineup is a playoff caliber bullpen as it is right now, which is a nice thing to say because they're missing some key pieces. You know, Keenan Middleton, we'll talk about him a little later on. He's probably done for the season. Riley O'Brien's injured. Nick Robertson is injured as well. Giovanni Gallegos is injured. Like, their bullpen looked really good. The offense, I understand kind of some people being critical of the offense today because the offense did not showcase itself very well over the weekend. In 2 of those games, it kind of woke up a little bit last night. But it's a little tough for me to grade them. That's why I called incomplete, because they're missing 3 of their best bats. Right. They're missing Noot, Donovan, and Wilson Contreras. The bad for the Cardinals was their starting pitching and their defense. Yeah. Their defense was atrocious this weekend. And it's becoming a major problem for them of late in the last 20 games. But man, their defense was bad. The starting pitching wasn't very good. And I think the starting pitching is the biggest reason you're leaving this weekend series and going, man, you are really behind the Philadelphia Phillies. Mm-hmm. Because I knew their offense was going to have some struggle points because of those bats that you are missing. And I knew that they were probably going to struggle because a lot of teams struggle against Aaron Nola. The Phillies bullpen is really good, and that's why even though Suarez didn't throw a ton of innings, I think he threw 2 before he left that game injured, he's a really good pitcher. They should hit Taijuan Walker, and they hit Taijuan Walker. So I knew the offense was going to have its problems this weekend. The tough part for me is the starting pitching wasn't good enough. Sonny Gray wasn't very good. I understand he struck out 10, but that wasn't a great performance against Philadelphia.
He gave you 5 innings.
Yeah, and he gave up 4 earned runs. Yeah. And 4 of those runs, you brought this to my attention last night when we were kind of texting of, the rotation really didn't give you much of a chance because they give runs early on.
Yeah.
Michaels gives up 3 in the first 3 innings. Gray gives up 4 and Lynn gives up 2. So now you've got to chase the game. And when you go up against the Philadelphia Phillies, you don't want to be chasing the game. You want to try and strike first, and that way you can really force the pressure onto their offense. But it didn't matter because your pitching staff's not good enough. The rotation is not a playoff caliber rotation right now, and I think the Phillies proved that to you this weekend, and that's why we're leaving going, yeah, this is where we are. They're a middling team because they don't have good enough starting pitching.
At the same time, though, like you can look at the pitching and see the problems there, but at the end of the day, when you score 2 runs and you score 1 run, you're not going to win many baseball games. Like the thing with the pitching is you don't have the offense that can step in and keep you competitive in games when the pitching does struggle.
Yeah.
You don't.
And that's why because I thought the same thing that T-Bone did, where it was like, look, you didn't have Wilson Contreras, you took Donovan, you took Nootbaar out of the lineup. Like, that's a hard thing to do against the Phillies. But I got to be honest, I look at this offense every single time they get these types of matchups, and I say, even with all of those guys, even if that roster was 100% healthy, I don't think they could get it done because, yes, a lot of teams struggle against this type of elite pitching. But that's the pitching you got to go up against if you're going to make the playoffs. And that's the part for me that it just felt like it certified who the Cardinals were. You've gone 1 for 7. You've gone 1-7 against the Milwaukee Brewers this season. Or 1-6. You win 1 out of 7 games. And then when you played the Dodgers, you won 1 of 4. Like, those 2 teams that I just mentioned are the top seeds in the National League. And then the Phillies, you played them earlier this season, you lost 2 of 3. And then you just lost 2 of 3 again. You're not going to be a National League Central Division team. You're going to be a wild card team that's in this race right now, which, surprise, surprise, you're in the playoffs because everyone else around you is just as bad. You're going to be one of these teams that sneaks in, and you're going to have to go up against these teams in the playoffs. So that's why it just felt like it clarified. This is a team that's going to back into a wild card. They're going to lose in the wild card round, and we're going to be in the same spot that we were in last year and the year prior and the year prior.
Yeah, I do think to that point right there is why the weekend did feel pretty frustrating because it looked a lot like, what was that last playoff appearance? Oh, yeah, 2022 when they lost to the Phillies.
I forgot that they didn't make the playoffs last year because they were literally one of the 10 worst teams in the Major League Baseball. Sorry.
It did remind me a lot of that 2022 series, right? To where you see the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, you didn't see Zach Wheeler like you did in 2022, but you see their pitching shut down what we thought was a pretty good offense. And even though they're missing Donovan and Newt, the offense should be better than what it was over the weekend, in my opinion. So you see the pitching staff shut you down. You see your rotation do I would call it an okay job. They got hurt by the defense. They were fine, but fine's not good enough against the Philadelphia Phillies. Your bullpen was awesome, like unbelievably good. Where it comes for me is the rotation because, yes, I understand the offense does have to come through. Man, it's a race to 3 in the playoffs. And you know what the Cardinals did? They lost the race to 3 in all 3 games. Yep. Well, not the third one. It was close, though.
Literally, in every game that they played against a nationally, because somebody texted in and said, what about the win against the Baltimore Orioles? Every blind squirrel finds a nut at some point, and that's what that one felt like to me. But in all of the National League games, to T-Bone's point, you lost the race to 3. You lost it to the Dodgers, you lost it to the Phillies, you lost it to Milwaukee. Sure, you beat San Diego, and sure, you beat the Chicago Cubs, but those are you. It's like the Spider-Man meme. You're pointing back at each other.
And yeah, exactly. And those series that you're talking about with San Diego and the Chicago Cubs, those are the kind of series that are going to determine if the Cardinals are a playoff team. Not the one against Baltimore, not the one against Philadelphia. Like, it's nice that they did win that series against Baltimore. Honestly, they were playing really well at the time. Like, I don't want to take anything away from that series. The texture has a pretty good point on, hey, they did play well against Baltimore. They swept them. That 100% fair. I'm not going to try and take anything away from that. The series that will determine the St. Louis Cardinals season and if they are a playoff team are against the middling NL teams. You know, how do they do against San Diego? How do they do against the Cubs? How do they do against the Cincinnati Reds that kind of fall into this category? This series, and the reason that it is why I feel critical of the team today, was this was a series to try and say, hey, we've changed from where we were early on in the season when we went to LA to open things up to where we have changed and we are now a team that we can show you signs of life that can climb back into the NL Central race and also compete with some of the top teams in the NL. And Philadelphia just swatted that away and took 2 of 3 from you and had every chance to take that game last night. Now, credit to the Cardinals, they were able to pull at least one game away, but the Phillies were the team that just reminded you, hey, you're in the underbelly of the National League. You're not up here with us top dogs just yet.
Yeah, and another text from the 618, it says, I don't agree with you guys' or I don't disagree with your guys' general assessment of the Cardinals, but I think you're grossly overanalyzing the Phillies series. How do you explain the Baltimore series? You know how I explain the Baltimore series? The same way I explained the LA Dodgers series last year. That was the jumping off point where everyone was like, oh, they're back, and then they laid eggs. Now, I gave them credit. I said that Dodgers series was the Baltimore Orioles series, and guess what you did? You backed it up with the Cubs series. But this is what I was so worried about. And go ahead, T-Bone.
I'm having a tough time deciding if I would call this laying an egg against Philadelphia. Like, I think Philadelphia beat you in game 1 against Miles Mikolas. Actually, they beat you in 2 games. The defense didn't help you out. Like, they led to that one opening up a little bit in game 2 with the Arenado error that led to the Harper 2-run bomb. This didn't feel like the Cardinals laid an egg, but it certainly did not feel like they were able to kind of continue that momentum from the Baltimore series,
That's
which
fair.
was a couple series ago.
Yeah.
Like, if they go to, I'm trying to, like, Houston's still a decent team. When they play Colorado coming up, like, if they drop 2 of 3, or I don't remember, instead of 4 games that I don't remember, if they lose that series, that's the egg that they would lay.
Yeah, and that's fair. Maybe my Cardinals negativity took over. I'll be very upfront and honest about that. It probably did. But you did not continue the trend that you were doing. If you would have made 2 of those 3 competitive, then we could have talked. But you didn't, and that's where I'm concerned. And I know we've already gotten 3 of these texts on our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646, saying, guys, you're complaining about a playoff team. I don't understand it. They're a playoff team in the sense that you can call them a playoff team right now. But let me read you. Can I read you the last 10 games played by the teams that are in the wild card race and then within 3 games of the wild card? Listen to this in the National League.
This isn't going to be
This
good.
is their last 10 games. 5-5, 5-5, 8-2, 4-6, 6-4, 7-3. That's the Cardinals. Now listen to the teams that are fighting for them. 2-8, 5-5, 4-6, 4-6, 6-4, 3-7. Can I read you the American leagues? 4-6, 6-4, 7-3, 7-3, 6-4, 5-5. And then the teams that are in the wild card in the American League, 8-10, 4-6, and 7-3.
Just get in.
There's a massive difference from the American League being in a playoff race. If you were in the American League right now, you'd be 5 games out of a wild card spot.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
And yes, if you're a playoff team, I would love playoff baseball in St. Louis. But I want to see some type of like, hey,
2 games would be fun.
2 games would be fun. Probably none, because they wouldn't be in St. Louis. They'd be,
that's true. They'd
in
be
the other city.
like Milwaukee.
Ballpark Village would be fun.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's true. Ballpark Village would be a lot of fun.
Well, you know what? Bill DeWitt III is hoping that can happen.
And to your point on, like, you read the last 10, man, just look at the records. The NL stinks.
Yeah.
Cardinals are the last wild card, a game below 500. Just remember this, St. Louis, this race is not a fun race because this is going to be close for the entirety of the MLB season. It's not a fun race. Playoff baseball is fun. Just remember, the Cardinals are not a good baseball team.
They're the Toronto Blue Jays. They're the Toronto Blue Jays right now. Toronto is 28-30, and they're 4.5 games out of the playoff spot that is held, by the way, the bottom wild card team, 33-26.
Yeah.
That's the difference right now.
It's not a fun race. It's all just bad baseball.
We'll find out. But the Cardinals next up, they get set to take on the Houston Astros tonight. 3 in Houston, and then they come home for a homestand against Colorado and Pittsburgh. I'm sure everyone will jump back on board at that point if you haven't jumped off after that Phillies series. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. No BK today. No Cardinals offense over the weekend against Philly. But 2 key members were out of that lineup, and T-Bone thinks there's some similarities as to why. We'll get into that next here on 101 ESPN. So we complained a lot on Friday. T-Bone, you weren't here, but BK was mad.
About what?
I was laughing, and Bradford got a little irritated too, which I thought was great. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario.
Bradford angry.
We didn't either until we found out that Brandon Crawford was getting the start and Jose Fermin was not getting the start once Lars Nootbaar was on the IL, and then we found out Mason Wynn wasn't playing in that game. You know, bad back, whatever it might be.
Well, Crawford homered.
Yes. Man, when Crawford hit the home run, I made a pact to myself not to open up Twitter until the end of the night. And there were so many, Alex, here you go.
I expected to see a text from one of you guys, but I guess you guys made the silent agreement of if Crawford does something good, we're not going to acknowledge it.
So I was on the fast lane last week on Friday. Marsh was out, and so we were like, for the home run derby, we were like, oh, who should we give Marsh? We gave him Crawford as a joke.
And he got it.
I texted the guys right after, like, no freaking way.
Yep, that sounds about right. So you bash on a guy, and then he comes through. But look, we were upset when the Lars Nootbaar move happened, and Fermin came up, and Fermin wasn't in the lineup when Wynn wasn't playing for Crawford, regardless. Then we found out later that night that Brendan Donovan was a late scratch into that game on Friday, and he did not play the entire series against the Phillies. So that does sway the opinion, at least to say the least, for the Cardinals of not having those two guys in the lineup. And I find it, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season, if we're talking about Donovan and Nootbaar not being in the lineup and that's why you lost games, I would have been like, okay, what's wrong with this team? Because we all know Goldschmidt, Arenado, Wilson Contreras, those are the big boppers. But it is very evident that when you lose one of Donovan or Nootbaar, the team suffers. We saw that last year when Donovan went down with his winter soldier arm, did not come back, and the team just was already in a down spiral, but it got worse. Saw it at the beginning of this season with Lars Nootbaar and how they struggled, but we also saw it in this stretch where, they've gone 14-3 prior to the Phillies game. You saw how impactful those players are. But T-Bone, somebody had to fill the void of the nerd when BK was gone. And you took that assignment over the weekend.
Yeah, I did. And it is amazing that, because you're right, I remember last year when Donnie went out, it was clear the offense just couldn't function
and the
same.
whole vibe of the team felt bad,
exactly.
too.
And the same with Nootbaar. When Nootbaar's been out at times, and we talked about it on Thursday, the last day that I was here, that he's really dealt with a lot of injuries since being a St. Louis Cardinal. The vibe is off with him. So I went and looked because I was curious, what are the Cardinals without those guys? And I went since 2023 because that's when both of them have really been regular starters. They were both up in 2022 and eventually were starters, but the numbers get kind of skewed because it technically counts those games that they weren't there when I was doing this research. So since 2023, without Lars Nootbaar, the Cardinals are 23-29. That's a .442 win percentage, and that's just without Noot. That may include the Donnies in the lineup. Games in which Donnie has not been in the starting lineup since 2023, the Cardinals are 34-39. That's a .466 win percentage. And in games in which both Donovan and Lars Nootbaar are not in the starting lineup since 2023, the Cardinals are 6-18, and that includes last night's win, which is a .333 win percentage.
Wow.
It is clear that the St. Louis Cardinals offense cannot function at the same level without those two guys in the lineup. And that makes sense because those two guys really drive the on-base percentage that then really gets the offense going. So you now have runners in scoring position for Paul Goldschmidt, who is playing better of late.
And is also hitting 180 with runners in scoring position, but don't tell BK I said that.
Okay, that's fair. But you've got traffic on the bases, which puts more pressure
it's a threat
on the starters.
on the pitcher, and it makes them pitch differently, yes.
And forget this year with Paul Goldschmidt, but if you look at last year, when Goldie was playing well, what does that do? Well, it gives him a chance to drive in runs. Same with Nolan Arenado when he played well last year. When you've got Gorman or Burleson that are in that 4 spot or whatever they want to do with it, Herrera's been there at times when they go against a lefty. There's just traffic on the bases, which makes life so much harder on starting pitchers. Now, Nootbaar and Donovan aren't real steal threats, but at least they're driving that on base. And those left-handed bats, Donovan's got a little pop when he's right. I think he's probably got 15 home run power in his bat. Lars Nootbaar's got 20 home run power in his bat. Like, they are the perfect, ideal 1 and 2 hitters for a lineup. The problem is when one of them goes out, it really just brings down that on-base percentage at the top of the lineup, and it's why you see the Cardinals really struggle. I can't believe I'm saying this, but they almost feel like the most important Cardinals in 2024 because of what we just read off with these numbers. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado were top 3 for us when we did our list, along with Sonny Gray on the pitching side. these guys are the ones that really allow those guys to drive in and make this offense as deadly as it is when it is all right and clicking.
Yeah, and I mean we're gonna dive into more of this a little bit later in terms of the impact of the young players, but right now you could say the same thing if you take Mason Wynn out of the lineup. If you take him out of the lineup, I think this team is lost. If you pluck Alec Burleson out of the lineup, I think this team is lost. But with Donovan and Nootbaar, and look, there's no denying who they are. Like when I brought up the, with runners in scoring position and the batting average, like Brendan Donovan, 263, 281 for Lars Nootbaar. So those guys have been critical for you. And like, look at what Nootbaar did against the Cubs and against the Cincinnati Reds, and then what Brendan Donovan did against the Cincinnati Reds and the Chicago Cubs. No coincidence that you were winning those games and picking up those series wins. But like if you look at just the OPS for what Brendan Donovan has been for you so far this season, I mean, you're putting him in the same conversation as guys like Will Benson from the Cincinnati Reds. Sorry, Ronald Acuna Jr. I was looking at the wrong one. Starling Marte, Jesse Winker, O'Neill Cruz, Brandon Nimmo, Luis Garcia, Ozzy Albies. Like, you're seeing the impact of those types of players. They're role players. And when you pluck role players away from the team suffers from it. That's the hard part. Apparently, Siri didn't like what I was saying. She probably didn't like what I was saying. The hard part with this is a team shouldn't function when you pluck one or two guys out of the lineup that they completely crumble. And that's what it does feel like when you take one of those two guys away from this team.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is just because and I don't really call this like a critical thing on the Cardinals because I don't think a lot of teams could function if they lose their on-base guys. Like if Brandon Nimmo was playing well this season, was back to being Brandon Nimmo of old, once you pluck that guy from the lineup, the Mets aren't the same guy. And you saw that last year when they were missing Starling Marte. You brought up his name there. He's a really good on-base guy. And when he was out of the lineup last year, the Mets really struggled. Now, they just sucked as a whole, but they struggled when he was really out of the lineup. The Cardinals don't have those high on-base guys to really fill that void at the top of the lineup. Mason Wynn's kind of becoming that, but he's from the right side. He's almost a different conversation. We're seeing the importance of left-handed bats across baseball. And I just saw on our YouTube page, what about Tommy Edman? Tommy Edman's not a leadoff hitter because he doesn't have a very high on-base percentage. He's like a perfect 8 or 9 hole hitter, so he doesn't really fall into this conversation as well.
Tommy Edman is what Dylan Carlson is to me. Now, I think there's a little bit more pop in his bat with Tommy Edman, but you're only using him against certain pitchers like they tried to use with Dylan Carlson in this series. And I feel bad, but I think it's time we have to talk about Dylan Carlson.
About put him in the lineup more?
No.
Oh.
I mean, look, there's so many people that push back when we bring up Dylan Carlson and say, like, he's just not an everyday player for you. And people say, well, you need to give him the opportunity. And there's going to be people that push back with what I'm about to say because it was against Philadelphia. But we saw it. We saw it 3 straight games where he was getting multiple at-bats, and 2 of them he started and finished the game. And you got 1 hit, and you had 3 strikeouts, and you had 1 walk. There's just not competitive at-bats with Dylan Carlson right now. And I understand where you were at because you needed somebody to take that void, and Dylan Carlson's defense is probably better than playing Jose Fermin a lot in the outfield or Alec Burleson a lot in the outfield. But when this team is healthy, I don't think there's a role for Dylan Carlson on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you start to see Walker go on a tear, like in the minor leagues, they're off every Monday. So let's say he goes on a 6-game tear, hits 4 home runs, is really starting to show that power. I think Walker's up and he's starting in right field. Yeah. And Dylan Carlson probably goes down. He's got options left. He just looks lost.
I mean, you look at it. You got Nootbaar in left. You got Nootbaar probably...
Donovan
I guess
for the time
Donovan
being.
and left, but when you're fully healthy, it's either going to be Nootbaar or Donovan and left. You're going to keep Michael Ciani in center field, and right field should and will be Jordan Walker when he's up there. And we didn't even mention an Alec Burleson making sure he's getting at bats. He's a 5th outfielder on this team. And if you're trying to put together the best lineup, T-Bone, I don't know how that meshes well if your defense isn't elite or if you're not going to be able to be a replacement bat.
Yeah, and I think there's a role for him on this team. He's just not taking it and running with it.
Well, yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that the Cardinals need, and I'm glad that Eduardo Perez mentioned this on the broadcast yesterday. Now, granted, it's a little bit of a different conversation because they are dealing with injuries right now, but I've felt this way when they are healthy. They don't have a right-handed bat that they can turn to off the bench. This is a left-handed heavy lineup. You think about it when they are healthy and right. You've got Nootbaar, you've got Donovan, you've got Gorman, you've got Burleson. That's 4 left-handed bats on top of Michael Ciani, who's a center fielder. Now, he hits in the 9 spot. You can easily pinch hit for him. That's 5 left-handed bats in this lineup. They're too left-handed heavy, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I think it's a good thing.
Left-handed bats are so important in the postseason. They need somebody, though, as a right-handed bat that can come off of the bench. That's why Fermin has a role on this team if he can hit left-handed pitching. It's where Dylan Carlson could have a role on this team to where late in games when they go to those high-leverage left-handed relievers like Alvarado for the Philadelphia Phillies in this series, when you get to that Ciani spot in the order, or if Burleson, for example, starts to struggle with left-handed pitching, or Gorman goes through a spell where he's not hitting left-handed pitching, then you can go to Carlson, which in his career has been good against lefties. But so far this season, he's not been good against righties. He's not been good against lefties. He's not been good, period. And that's where it is, okay, he's having another chance to take a role with the St. Louis Cardinals, and once again, he is not capitalizing on it. So when they get healthy or when Walker starts hitting, he should probably be one of the first guys they send down, and there is no trade value in him right now. And I don't even know if it can be salvaged at this point with Dylan Carlson.
At the same time, though, and someone brought this up on the YouTube chat, NY said, you DFA Carlson, he will be the next Garcia, LOL. And it kind of feels that way. Like, if Carlson is not on this team and he's on another team, he will probably take off and come back to burn the Cardinals again, because that's what happens to this team. And to add to that, I think that right there is the reason why he will be held onto for so long.
But see, here's the thing. Like, he doesn't, and the YouTuber referenced Adolis Garcia, right? I think we're all on the same page with Adolis Garcia. It wasn't going to work here.
100%.
And everyone else passed on the opportunity. Dylan Carlson reportedly was dangled this offseason to be traded, and nothing came about that. Dylan Carlson has got his opportunities, had the opportunities here in St. Louis. It just feels a lot like if he goes on to have success elsewhere, I look at it the same way I look at O'Neill. I look at it the same way I look at Jack Flaherty. It was not going to work in St. Louis.
I'm 100% with you. This isn't a lack of opportunity for Dylan Carlson. Carlson's had plenty of opportunities, and he just has gone downhill since that, 2021 season, his rookie season.
149 games he played that season.
Yeah, like he was good in 2021, and then it's just gone downhill from 2022 to 23 to now in 2024. And maybe it is the injuries that have played a part of that. But at this point, if I'm talking about the injuries of the past, is it fair for me to assume he may never get back to 2021 form?
Yeah.
He's running out of runway here in St. Louis.
But to the YouTuber's point that Grant referenced, that is why the Cardinals will hold on to him.
And to be clear, I'm not saying, because the YouTuber mentioned DFAing, I'm not saying DFA Dylan Carlson.
No, he's got options. You send him down.
I think you still try and salvage this with Dylan Carlson and see if you can do what you're trying to do with Jordan Walker when you have an opportunity for him. Get him down the minor leagues, get him playing time every single day, and see if you can fix his bat potential.
NY sent us one of those comments. You can send them as well up on our YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cams are sponsored by the Air Alliance team. Coming up in 15 minutes, we are going to get into some questions and answers. You send us a question to our Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to it, 314-399-9646. But coming up next, we now know the matchup in the Stanley Cup final. The Edmonton Oilers take down the Dallas Stars last night. Is there anything the Blues can learn from them? For me, I think it means one big move for St. Louis. I'll explain coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Over the weekend, the Cardinals won 1 out of 3 games in Philadelphia against the Phillies. They won last night to end that series. Tonight, they'll start a series with the Houston Astros in Houston. It'll be Kyle Gibson on the mound for the Cardinals, going up against Justin Verlander for the Astros. It'll be a 7:10 first pitch from Minute Maid Park. For the Battlehawks this weekend, they won a huge game over the San Antonio Brahmas, as they will have dome field advantage in the playoffs coming up this weekend here in St. Louis. And for St. Louis City SC, they played to a 3-3 draw down in Miami with Inter Miami. The NHL finals are set. The Stanley Cup final will be the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. We'll get into a little bit of that here next on BK and Ferrario. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All the way around, Marchman cuts it off. Robertson shot glances wide. 3 seconds left. They've waited 18 years. They get it. The Edmonton Oilers are Western Conference champions. They are on their way to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 2006.
That's John Forsland on the call, as last night the Edmonton Oilers took down the Dallas Stars in Game 6 to go to the Stanley Cup final. Connor McDavid finally gets his first appearance on the big stage. And with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. I'll be honest, I won't be a hypocrite. I did not see that happening. I thought Edmonton was weak in goal. I thought they were weak in terms of depth offensively, and I thought Dallas was the heavier team. Now, injuries played a role. When you lost Christopher Tanev and he wasn't 100%, welcome to Connor McDavid having his way with you. And frankly, they didn't play disciplined enough to win that series for how lethal Edmonton's power play was. But as I'm watching Edmonton celebrate last night, and you heard him mention, 34 years since they've been in this position back to the Stanley Cup final. And I heard Curbs talk about it earlier today, like you get a lesson on how not to rebuild from the Edmonton Oilers. I'm thinking, because there's always lessons to be learned from teams that have success in the playoffs. What did this team do well? If you watch Florida, it's you should have traded for Matthew Tkachuk. But when you're watching the Edmonton Oilers, I think a lot of people, the lesson they'll say is, well, you need to draft Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And sarcastically, that's true. But I think there's more to it with what Edmonton did this year. And it's twofold for me. One, they added depth to take the load off of their top players. If you look at what Edmonton did in 2022 when they made it to the Western Conference Final and was swept by the Colorado Avalanche, Connor McDavid was averaging 23 and a half minutes a night. Leon Draisaitl was averaging 23-15. 2023 Stanley Cup playoff, when they got bounced in the second round by Vegas, Connor McDavid averaging 23 and a half minutes. Leon Draisaitl averaging about 23 minutes. Now, this postseason, where they've made it to the Stanley Cup final, Connor McDavid, he's averaging 22 minutes and 55 seconds. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but you're taking away basically 2 or 3 shifts from Connor McDavid in the game. Leon Draisaitl was averaging 21 minutes and 24 seconds in this postseason. And right now, he's got the second most points on the Edmonton Oilers. They added depth to their forward group to where they could trust their third and fourth line. Guys like Adam Henrique provided defensive awareness, but they added strength on defense. And this just solidifies what we've talked about, T-Bone, for the last month with the Blues. If you want to get to this point, you need to have lockdown defense. In a matter of 2 seasons, they promoted 2 of their top 10 draft picks in Broberg and Bouchard. They signed Cody Ceci, and they traded for Matthias Ekholm with Darnell Nurse. That's their top 4 that locked down the Dallas Stars last night. So those were the 2 things for me after watching them win, to sit there and say, okay, I understand what Edmonton did. That's the map of how you can get back to this point.
Yeah, I like what you said there about their depth, because I think the biggest issue that you've seen from Edmonton and Toronto, who are the two teams that have kind of been in the same conversation the last couple of years, where it is, wow, look at their star power. Draisaitl, McDavid, and Hyman. And then you look at Toronto, it's Matthews, it's Marner. Who's the other one I'm forgetting with Toronto?
Nylander and Tavares.
Thank you. Those four guys, like, it's always been about, wow, look at their star power. Look at the core four in Toronto. And then they always end up being out in the second round. Well, why is it? Because they don't have depth in their lineup. And that was the same conversation for the Edmonton Oilers over the last couple of years. And now you're starting to see that kind of piece together for them in terms of now they can roll out four lines, take a couple of shifts off of McDavid and Draisaitl that you mentioned there. And defensively, it's another point that you brought up there as well of, you know what, man, if you don't have a good defensive core, you're not going anywhere in the playoffs. To me, having a good defense in the Stanley Cup playoffs is like having starting pitching in baseball and having a good defense in football.
Yep.
Like, you have to have it, otherwise you're not going anywhere. And if you don't have a good top four, like, you can have a great top pairing, but you need to have a second pair that you can throw out there as well. It is not just having one legitimate pairing on defense. You have to have a top four that is legitimately good to have a fighting chance to get around in the playoffs. And I think the other one for me is, it's weird because I don't think Stuart Skinner's a great goaltender by any means, but you got to have the guy in net that can make the big saves when needed.
Yep.
He cannot be the guy that lets in the one goal that can really flip momentum in a hockey game. It's so easy and it's so obvious to say, but your starting goaltender in the Stanley Cup playoffs cannot give up the backbreaking goal and has to be able to make the momentum swinging save when you need it, and that's what Stuart Skinner did last night and has done so far in these playoffs.
I think Dallas made the mistake, too, of sort of playing into Edmonton's style.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't take two penalties in the first period against that team.
And they know you can't take two penalties,
Exactly.
but Dallas still did it because Edmonton got them to that tipping point.
Dallas outshot Edmonton 8-3 to start the game, and it was 2-0 Edmonton.
Yep.
Because they put them on two power plays, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, and to T-Bone's point, too, the goaltending, like, the moment Jake Ottinger let that second goal in, it squeaked right past his left pad, I think it was. That's when I knew the game was over. That was the back-breaking goal that you can't give up.
And especially on the road in a series like that, you got to come out, you got to start well, and you got to score that first goal.
Yeah.
You score that first goal, take the crowd out of it, then all of a sudden you build some momentum. Dallas played a really good game last night. They outshot Edmonton 35-10. It was the two power plays, and from there it was Stuart Skinner that shut it down. But for Edmonton, they can't rely on goaltending or Stuart Skinner to win the Stanley Cup final for them because it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Stuart Skinner had a good series against Dallas, but overall in the playoffs, he's not been very good.
Yeah, and I mean, like, really, like, Dallas poured it on in the third period, which you'd expect. It's desperation. They had 13 shots. But the second period, for me, like, Dallas just didn't have the same type of energy. And look, they were a depth team. They had 9 shots on goal in that second period compared to Edmonton having 5. That's when you feel like you took the gas out of the engine. When you got 2 goals, they didn't get any, and you're thinking we're not coming back from this one. I did have one other thought last night, and I know I'm going to sound crazy with this. You guys are probably going to laugh. I think what Edmonton did in this postseason run solidified for me the need for the Blues to trade into the top 10 at this draft. And what I mean by that is, I looked at this. So Matthias Ekholm, I thought, was the factor as to why they've changed this. But they traded for Ekholm last year. And 2 years ago, they got to the conference final. And then last year, they traded for Ekholm. They get bounced in the second round. This year, they go all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Ekholm was there last year. Why wouldn't they have been able to get it done? The difference was Evan Bouchard. And if you guys look at Evan Bouchard, he is having a sensational postseason run. Last year, he was in the postseason with them, had 17 points in 12 games. The year prior, 9 points in 16 games. He was drafted 10th overall back in 2018. This year, he played legit top pair minutes. And he is second or third in the team with 27 points. He's a plus 14, and he is their best power play player. I look at what the Edmonton Oilers did in drafting this kid in the top 10 and say to myself, you need to find yourself your Evan Bouchard. And you're not going to trade for him. You're not going to find a 24-year-old top pair defenseman unless you draft him. And there are 6 defensemen. I was reading Corey Pronman or Scott Wheeler's rankings earlier today. There are 6 defensemen that he views as top pair-esque talent that are going to get selected in the first round this year. If you can trade into the top 10, you're bound to get one of those guys because I just don't foresee. I mean, one's going to be a forward in Macklin Celebrini, and then you've got 3 other guys that need to be selected if you're in the top 10. You need to trade in the top 10 because to me, you got to go get yourself an Evan Bouchard, a Miro Heiskanen, and Aaron Ekblad. You've got to find yourself a top pairing defenseman that can play on the power play and play heavy minutes for you. That's how you get to this point, that like the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I like the idea because this certainly feels like the offseason in which, though I tend to believe, and we've talked about this before on the show, and we differ on this opinion a little bit, I tend to believe the Blues are going to get worse before they get better. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting that this certainly feels like the offseason in which you either draft the future top pair defenseman or you go and find them out on the market. Because if you can find a way to trade into the top 10, I mean, you just said there's, 6 guys that are considered that?
Yeah.
And that's what Edmonton did. They found a puck-moving defenseman in the draft. They draft him, and boom, look at that. He's in the top 4. They're playing well, and they're playing late in the season into the Stanley Cup Finals. Yeah. And the same can be said on the market as well. We've talked about it on the show. It feels like there's a couple of guys that could be on the trade front for the St. Louis Blues to go out and acquire. I don't care how they do it, but it certainly feels like this is the offseason in which they have to, because there are off seasons in the past where you can say, like, whether it's the Cardinals need a starting pitcher or the Blues need a top 4 defenseman, but then you look at the market, both in free agency and the trade market, and you go, well, where were they going to get that? Because none of those guys were available. It certainly doesn't feel that way this season.
And somebody texted in and said, draft and wait 4 to 5 years. That doesn't make sense, Alex. First of all, you don't have to draft and wait 4 to 5 years. Evan Bouchard was playing in the postseason for them 3 years after they drafted him 10th overall, and a lot of that is because of COVID taking place. But you draft and you wait 3 to 4 years. What's the expectation for people of when this team gets to a cup contention? 3 to 4 years. When the Oilers drafted Bouchard, McDavid was 2 years, or I'm sorry, was he drafted 2013 or 2016?
Bouchard?
No, McDavid.
McDavid, he would have been drafted in 2016.
So they drafted this kid 2 years after they drafted Connor McDavid. You draft a top 10 defenseman this year, you are on the same time frame as Jake Neighbors, Jimmy Snuggerud, Dalibor Dvorsky, along with Robert Thomas. You're in the same window that you're hoping you can retool this thing together.
I think where I stand on this, though, is like how much of a improvement in quality of a prospect are you going to get going from 16 to, say, 8 or 9? I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference. I really don't.
But I don't think the defenseman's going to be there for you. That's what the defensemen that are viewed as top pair defensemen, at least from Scott Wheeler's perspective, and we'll probably have him on as we get closer to the draft. Once you lose those 6 guys, it is a significant drop off. Now we're talking like Theo Lindstein upside, where maybe he could be good, but he's never going to be the number 1 guy. The 6 guys that are going to go defensemen, and I mean, at least the mock drafts I've seen, they're going top 12. You're not going to get a top pair guy unless you're in the top 10. That's where the difference is. And I mean, there's teams that are going to trade. I don't think New Jersey wants to draft in that position. I don't think Seattle wants to draft in that position. I don't think Ottawa or Montreal or Columbus want to draft in that position. If they can get an NHL established player, I think they'd be willing to trade.
And you mentioned kind of their timeline. They are in a unique position to where they can do one of 2 things. They can go get a proven guy, as long as he's got term, of course, on his contract, or they can also draft the guy and wait on him. Because not only is it potential, once you get into that top 10, kind of what you're talking about by moving up there, you might get a guy that can end up being NHL ready faster than you're of expecting.
If he's a good, he could be there in a couple of years.
Now, it could be 3-4 years before he gets here. It could be 2 years, but you're not going to end up hitting his prime years until probably after 3-4 years of experience in the NHL level. But where the Blues are in their timeline, they kind of are in a unique situation to where they can kind of do both. You know, if the Blues were getting ready to exit this retool, trading into the top 10 would not make sense in my opinion.
Right.
It would be one of those to where it is, okay, this doesn't really line up with what you're trying to do, but because they are in, whether you want to call it year 2 or year 3 of their retool, they're in a unique spot to where they kind of have 2 different paths, and they almost have, this is the offseason which they have to pick which one they're going to go down.
Yeah. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're getting a couple of other questions about the defenseman topic that we just brought up. So we'll answer that and more of your questions. You can send them to us, 314-399-9646 on our Air Comfort Service text line. Also on our YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. Questions and answers is next on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. Our studio cams brought to you by the Air Alliance team at 101 ESPN STL. Along with T-Bone and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Questions and answers now here on 101 ESPN. We got this one continuing the previous conversation of trying to trade into the top 10. Alex, what do you think it takes to get there? I think it's situational, because it depends on what team you're trading with. Like the teams for me that I identify that would be willing to trade, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Ottawa, and Montreal. Those are the teams that I could see being willing to trade out of their spot. You're going to have to put your pick in there. So you're giving the 16th pick up. Probably going to have to throw in one of your seconds. And it's going to have to be an NHL player. It's going to have to be a Pavel Buchnevich. It's going to have to be a Brandon Saad if he's willing to move his no-trade clause. You're going to have to send an NHL-established player to one of these teams if they're willing to trade out of that spot.
Do you think it would take an NHL player to move up like that?
For one of those teams, yes. Because I think the reason those teams would be willing to give up a pick that high for a young established player is they feel like they can win sooner rather than later, and they don't want to wait around for that player.
I would say unless there's a player that they're eyeing that they think is going to fall back later in the draft. So
could be.
You know, like, for example, last year, Arizona. I forget the name of the player that they drafted in the first round.
Boot or the Daniil Butt or something like that.
Russian, right?
But he wasn't projected to go top 10, and I think Arizona drafted him, like 7 or 8?
That was the Dmitry Simashev one. That was the one I got way too excited to hear about. Because that was when I knew Dvorsky was going to drop.
That's when we were able to draft Dvorsky. But for them, like, I don't know why they didn't move back. Because he wasn't projected to go in the top 10. So they could have gotten probably a second or a third round pick if they would have just moved back and still gotten their player.
It would take some surgery with your roster, but I think you could do it. But it just depends on who you identify as the guy and if you can realistically get him before another team jumps in. From the 314, guys, considering the upcoming schedule, do you see the Cardinals winning 10 to 11 games in their next 16?
Just an update on their schedule for their next 16 games here. 3 at Houston, which they start that series tonight. 4 versus Colorado. 3 versus Pittsburgh. 3 at the Cubs. 3 at the Marlins. That's their next 16 games.
I don't think you can win the series against Houston, even though I know Houston's struggling, but you're going to have Gibson, Palante, and Michaelis.
That sounds like a sweep.
For Houston. Colorado, I think you win 3 of 4. I think you get 1 versus Houston. Honestly, it's a toss-up with Pittsburgh because I think they're the same as you. I don't think you have the same success against the Cubs. I think you can come away 4, 5, 6. I think you come away with 8 or 9 wins. So I don't think you come away with 10 or 11. I think you only win 2 series. I think you win the Colorado one, and I think you win the Miami one. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, for them to win 10 of 11, they got to surprise us with either the Astros or the Cubs because they should be able to beat Colorado. They should be able to beat Pittsburgh because I don't find Pittsburgh to be that compelling. They've got some fun pitching, but they're not great, and Miami sucks. So I will actually say that they can do it because we just saw them sweep the Cubs at home. Now, going to Wrigley's tough. We've seen this adventure a lot in the last handful of years. But I think they could take 2 or 3 from Chicago. They might be able to take 2 or 3 from the Astros because you're kind of hitting them at the right time because you're getting Verlander tonight and then you're getting 2 of their worst. Blanco's been fine, but you should be able to kind of hit him. And then I can't remember, Urquidy or Arrighetti, one of those guys goes tomorrow. So I'll say they can. It's just going to come down to do they take 2 of 3 either at Houston or at Chicago. If they can win one of those series, they're going to be able to get to this mark.
I think we say this a lot, but I really do think that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, you'll learn a lot about this team.
I feel like I say that from April till like August.
But specifically in comparison to last year, because it was after that big win streak last year that they started to fall off again. They got swept by the Pirates. You got the Pirates coming up in this next set of games. I think they won 2 of 4 against the Reds after that stretch last year. You've got 4 coming up against Colorado. Like, you're going to be able to look at this stretch over the next 2 to 3 weeks and compare to last year and see kind of where this team stacks up.
You're 500 right now?
One game below.
One game below. You got 10 games before Flag Day. And my guy Mike Claiborne always establishes Flag Day is you know who you are. You can either be above 500 or below 500, one of those two. And I think that is going to tell you exactly who you are by the end of it.
And you mentioned in, I think it was our first or second segment, I can't remember which one, earlier today, that, you brought up last year in the Dodgers series where they built momentum and then they laid an egg. Colorado, Pittsburgh, that's where you avoid laying the egg because they're better than both those teams. Colorado's one of the worst in the NL. Pittsburgh, I think you're better than them. So
Colorado, I think you take care of. Pittsburgh's the one I'm worried you win one of three.
Depending on how the pitching falls. But even then, their offense sucks. You should take 2 or 3 from them.
That'll be a defining moment for a lot of people. Okay, final one here. Guys, questions and answers from the 636. With the Vikings signing Justin Jefferson, what type of impact does it have on future signings of the wide receivers? I think it has a massive impact because he's the highest paid position player, non-quarterback position player now with that contract. Plan for Tyreek Hill to have a bigger contract next season.
Yeah,
and CeeDee Lamb, I'm assuming, is going to be close to that.
Yeah, I'll be fascinated to know if someone can reset the market after this one because Justin Jefferson to me is by far the best wide receiver in the NFL, and I don't even know if CeeDee Lamb has the negotiation leverage to get a better contract than that. Same with Jamar Chase. Same with who's the other one I'm forgetting in Cincinnati?
T. Higgins.
Thank you. They're both due up for contracts soon.
Yeah.
Even Tyreek, I don't know if he'll be at that point because he's getting older. So I'm fascinated. It's going to have a major impact because the dollar is going to keep going up for these wide receivers. But I would be hesitant to give any of those guys that I just mentioned that big a deal to beat Justin Jefferson's contract.
I'm interested to see, and this goes for the Dolphins too, because they're really building around their wide receivers. They signed Waddle last week, but seeing how they really fare over the next few years during these contracts, really heavily investing into their wide receivers because they've got Tyreek Hill and Waddle, and now with Minnesota really heavily investing in Justin Jefferson, how does that affect where they're building around? I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for both those teams.
Absolutely. He's Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, the series against the Phillies proved one thing to us, and that's the lack of pitching for the Cardinals. We'll explain coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, keeping me and my family comfortable with their outstanding customer service when it comes to our HVAC system. And look, everybody is going to be focusing on that right now for how hot it is outside. You know the humidity's coming. You want to make sure that your unit is ready to go. I had them come out last week to do my maintenance checkup, which I'm on their maintenance program. They come out every 6 months. They check the unit. They tune it up. They make sure it's good to go for the year, but they take such good care of it. What I love about Classic Air Care is their honesty. When you get the customer service, you know you have the knowledgeable technicians that are coming out talking to you about your HVAC system. They explained to me how old a coil was on our HVAC unit, and because it was so old, it was going to force the unit to work harder than it needed to, and that was going to raise our energy bill. So we fixed it, and next thing you know, we have no more issues. So make sure you use the smart, the knowledgeable, the trustworthy company, and that's Classic Air Care. I've been using them since 2016. My dad's been using them since he bought his first home. Check them out. Tell him Alex Ferrario sent you. It's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We're up on our YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. Our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. No BK today. He filled in on the morning show earlier here on 101 ESPN. He'll be back with us tomorrow. Cardinals are back in action tonight after losing 2 of 3 to Philadelphia, T-Bone. And we've talked about kind of what they've done for our thoughts on them. But one area that was very evident in that series against Philadelphia is your starting pitching is good enough to back into the playoffs, but that's it. It is not good enough to get any damage done for you. And I mean, you had arguably your 3 best guys going in that series with Miles Mikolas. Believe what you want about Miles, but they view him as their number 2. You had Sonny Gray and you had Lance Lynn. Those are the 3 guys that I would say, the exception of Mikolas because he's been so up and down. But at least recently, those are the 3 guys that you trust when they take the mound. Kyle Gibson's the 4th one that you put in there. Miles Mikolas, not a bad outing, but you gave up the lead in the 2nd inning. 6 innings, 5 hits, 3 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, and those 3 earned runs came courtesy of that home run off of Miles. So right there for you. You're not, I mean, you get 6, but you're not getting the innings and the ability to shut down the other side when you give up those 3 runs in the 6th inning. Then you get to Sonny Gray. That's your stopper. That's the one I think we all viewed as, hey, this is your opportunity to win the series. Sure, you were going up against Ranger Suarez, but you had the chance to basically go toe-to-toe with this team. Gives up 3 runs in the 1st inning, only gives you 5 innings, 3 walks, has the 10 strikeouts, but the 10 strikeouts to me are a moot point when you're down 3-0 in the 1st inning. And then Lance Lynn gave you really the best outing out of all 3 of them, even though it was 4 innings, kept it very competitive. He outruns tag to him because bad defense behind him. You just got 15 innings against the Phillies and your 3 best guys, and you were trailing in all of those games by the 3rd inning. To me, Jim Bowden had it on his piece on The Athletic, which shouldn't surprise anybody that this team he believes is still a seller, but he said that if this team is going to be doing anything, it's going to be bringing in another starting pitcher. I don't think it should just be another starting pitcher, T-Bone. You need to bring in an upgrade over 2 of those 3 guys.
Yeah, I'm with you because to me, and look, a lot of people, I tweeted out last night that, for me, the rotation was bad in this series. And a lot of people said, well, that was because of the defense. The defense forced them to pitch more. They had a 4.2 ERA. That's not bad. Well, that's not great in playoffs. A 4.2 ERA isn't great for the playoffs. And going 5 innings from your starters, and to your point, giving up the lead early on in the first 3 innings isn't ideal. And my counter to the people that would say, well, the defense didn't help them out. Well, okay, sure, the defense didn't help them out, but those didn't lead directly to runs. Those guys still had chances to get guys out, and they didn't take advantage of it. They didn't help themselves. So I understand that to an extent, but to me, this rotation isn't a playoff caliber rotation, and they have some swing and miss, 19 strikeouts and 15 innings from those 3, which is pretty good for the Cardinals rotation. But this is a regular season rotation, in my opinion. It's going to get you to the playoffs probably. It's going to at least keep you competitive in the crappy NL wildcard race. But it just isn't a playoff caliber rotation. To me, when I think of a playoff caliber rotation, you have 2 guys that are at the front of that rotation that are like legit studs. And then you have a 3rd guy that can kind of piece it together, whether it be just one postseason run like Brandon Pfaadt did last year for Arizona, or it ends up being a guy that develops into a really good number 3 like Suarez is for the Philadelphia Phillies. But the Cardinals don't have another guy outside of Sonny Gray, and even he struggled, but I'm not going to overlook.
Sonny Gray's been great this season. Nobody's going to bash him. I just think it's very... If you're in a playoff game 1 and Sonny Gray's on the mound and you give up 3 runs in the first 2 innings, to me, that's not the number 1 guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but what they clearly are missing is that number 2 guy, because when you think of Nola, you think of Wheeler. I've brought this up before. Anytime those guys start, you feel like you could see something special that night. Mm-hmm. You could see a 15 strikeout performance, and they don't allow but 1 hit and no earned runs. And Gray's got that to his game. Now, it wasn't as pretty in Philadelphia. He struck out 10, but he gave up 4 earned runs. So the 10 strikeouts, as you said, not as impressive. They don't have a second guy, though, that you feel like is going to do something special. It's nice to know tonight that when Kyle Gibson takes the ball, you're probably getting 6 innings, but it's nothing special. It's not going to be that way with Lance Lynn. It's not going to be that way with Miles Mikolas, and Andre Pallante's still an unknown in that 5 spot. So they are lacking a number 2 starter, and I thought that was on full display this weekend. You didn't get the full effect of it from that Philadelphia side because, 1, you didn't see Zach Wheeler in this series, but 2, you didn't get to see Suarez a lot because he left the game injured. You got to see what Aaron Nola looks like, and he was really good for them. Suarez was good in the 2 innings that he worked, and he could have done something special against them as well. It is clear that when you stack up the Cardinals' rotation, Sonny Gray will give you a fighting chance against anybody that he matches up with.
Yes. John on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL is upset with me because we're blaming the pitchers when they scored 2 runs or 1 run in Sonny Gray's start and 2 runs on what was it, Friday. Yes. We talked about like the offense is not getting a pass, but a lot of teams are going to struggle against that. I don't believe you have a playoff caliber offense either. Now, when they're at full strength, we'll get a really good taste of it. But I'm not blaming the pitching, but what I'm saying is the pitching is not good enough for you to be the Milwaukee Brewers, the NL Central, or to go any distance in the postseason. Because your guys right now, when they take the mound, they're only giving you 5, which means you're using a lot more of your bullpen. And right now that bullpen is starting to get more and more depleted, but you're giving up the runs early. And it is so hard to play catch-up baseball where you're chasing these teams when you give up the runs in the first inning, in the second inning, in the third inning. Miles Michaelis gave up 3 in the second. Sonny Gray gave up 3 in the first inning. And then Lance Lynn, and again, Lance Lynn really got tagged for most of those because of the errors, but he still gave up 2 runs in the first inning. You were trailing in every one of these games by the time you entered the second inning. That's a problem.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to give a pass to the offense, but it's harder to grade the offense when they're missing 3 of the most important bats in the lineup. You know, Wilson Contreras was their best bat in April. Now, that doesn't say a lot because April sucked for this offense as a whole, but he was their best bat, and he's got a broken arm.
Right.
Brendan Donovan missed this whole series, a guy that's your leadoff hitter, because of his neck. You look at Lars Nootbaar, he's out because of a torn muscle in his body. Like, okay, I understand that the offense has to be better, but it's also a little tougher to judge the offense when they're missing 3 of their biggest pieces. You know, that'd be like saying that Philadelphia didn't have, I don't know, Nick Castellanos, and then they were missing a couple like Alec Boehm and maybe like Brandon Marsh, which you saw leave a game. Like, the offense is going to perform a little bit differently. Now, granted, they're a different story because their lineup is awesome 1 through 9.
Right.
But the rotation for me is the biggest reason in that series that you lost because of what you said. Early on, you were down in those games, and you just didn't match up. Like that Suarez game, I didn't feel good about Miles Michaelis going up against, or excuse me, Suarez is going to match up with who right now if you met in a playoff series? Like right now, if you met in a playoff series with the Phillies, you're going to get Wheeler versus Gray game 1. Game 2 is Aaron Nola versus who? Who's the 2 on the Cardinals right now? Like, sure, Gibson and Lynn have pitched very well, and Michaelis has pitched better of late. But all those guys you don't feel great about if you had them in a playoff series. You like them when you like maybe one of them, like Lance Lynn or Kyle Gibson could be a really solid 3-4 for you, but you just don't have that second guy that really matches up with a Aaron Nola. You saw that this weekend when Michaelis went up against him on Friday.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of things, too, is your bullpen now, because we got the news on Keenan Middleton over the weekend. I believe it was John Denton that put it out there that he was going to get
second
opinion on his arm. Thank you. And basically he was going to a Tommy John specialist, and it sounded pretty much like Keenan Middleton's season is essentially over. One, that's a bullpen arm that has failed once again for John Mozeliak, and no shot at Keenan Middleton. You can't do anything about injuries, but you lose a guy that was supposed to be a key member of that bullpen. We've talked a lot about when they've gone back and forth with Matthew Liberatore. Keenan Middleton was part of the reason that I felt like the strength of the Cardinals had a chance, because your bullpen was going to have 2 different waves of guys that could come at you in high leverage situations. And now that Keenan Middleton's not going to be seemingly available for you this season, Matthew Liberatore, who's gone back into this spot, but we know how this Cardinals team will fluctuate. They might go back to him in a starting spot. You go back to having your 3 big guys that you're relying on until Gallegos comes back, and depending on what that looks like.
Yeah, and we'll see what he looks like, because he was abysmal when he was up with the team.
Yeah, he was not a high-leverage guy.
I saw his first rehab outing went well, had a strikeout 1 inning, and it was clean, so maybe you get him back. But I think the Middleton update, and look, maybe it's not serious. We'll see what the second opinion says, but when was the last time you saw that happen?
Second opinions are like when the hockey team says, like, oh, we're going to have deeper analysis on whatever injury it is. Like when they're doing more and more research on it, second opinions never come back on the positive side.
Yeah, and I think with this news, and I'm probably expecting Tommy John here, I think it puts the Cardinals back in the relief market, in my opinion.
So you're in the relief market and you're in a top pitcher
they got
market.
a lot of holes.
Good.
I think it does potentially put them back in the market because right now you've got your big three, JoJo, Kittredge, and Helsley. And then that middle group of Fernandez and Liberatore, basically you've got those two guys. And if Gio comes back and looks good, maybe it changes this conversation. But I'm not planning on that right now because of what I saw early on in the season. So I think they're going to have to go out and find somebody else because Middleton was going to be, I don't know, nobody likes to hear this, as good as a trade when he did come back because now you had this four-headed monster, and I think you do need four legitimate arms in that bullpen. But I think for this team, it is easier for this team to potentially go out there and add to their bullpen at the trade deadline and make it deeper, which was what Middleton was going to do when he returned from injury, than it is for them to go out and get the number 2 starter. So losing Middleton potentially for the season really seems to hurt, in my opinion.
Someone did bring up a good point. At least John King's in there. And I mean, John King has been good for them. So hopefully that can be a power struggle, but you got a lot of lefties that have been good for you.
Fernandez has been good as well. The reason I think the Middleton injury is so impactful is because he was kind of a veteran, experienced reliever.
Yeah.
Now his career's been a weird up and down if you look at his baseball reference page.
Yeah.
But he was a experienced reliever that now is potentially done for the season, and it just feels like to me that this team's identity from the pitching side is that when they get to the playoffs or as you get later on in the season, they're going to have to cut games shorter, and that's why they just need to continue to have a bullpen that runs like 7 deep, and that's why I feel like they're probably going to need to add somebody to this bullpen mix.
A lot of ads are going to be needed for this Cardinals team as we approach that trade deadline, which Jim Bowden, if you read his work, if you like his work, basically said, don't waste your time.
Yeah, he basically called them sellers again, like he did when we had him on last week.
Again, he knuckles down on it, and he never backs down with it, which I respect. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Oilers and Panthers have shown the importance of a top power play. How important is it? I think that's the area of focus for the Blues this offseason. We'll discuss next here on 101 ESPN.
McDavid. Bicep steal. Walks in front of the shot and scores!
You talk about awesomeness. It's right here, folks. The quick little stick handle. He goes around Haskin. Watch the move right here. The pull, the back, and the forehand, backhand roof. That is an unbelievable goal on the power play.
That was the first goal scored last night for Edmonton on the power play that I guess you could say was the game-winning goal. Or no, I'm sorry, Hyman's was, but that was the start of the downfall of the Dallas Stars last night. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We already talked a little bit about the lessons that you can learn from the Edmonton Oilers, but one thing that was very apparent, and not just in the Edmonton series, but you could say the same thing with the Florida Panthers series, and really this postseason. If you don't have a successful power play, you are going to struggle in the playoffs. And really it comes down to successful special teams. Man, I was really surprised when I saw those numbers earlier today, and Grant and I were talking about it. When you look at the power play versus penalty kill between Edmonton and Dallas, the power play was at 34%. Was that right, Grant? And Dallas's penalty kill was 67%?
Yeah, so it was something like that. Let me get the exact numbers up for you.
Because I saw Friedman tweeted out last night in the middle of the game when that first power play goal had gone in for Edmonton.
So this season, Edmonton's power play is 37%.
37% in the postseason for the Edmonton Oilers, which, by the way, their penalty kill is 93.9%. We always talk about 5-on-5 play and how it really does feel like that in the playoffs. And I have a feeling that come Stanley Cup final time, you're not going to see as many penalties, although you do have one team that loves to get physical post-whistle. But Edmonton is doing this at an historic pace of how good their power play truly is. And here's the thing. It's not the power play that we talk about. We talk about power play in terms of, oh, you need the net front presence. You need to have Zach Hyman or Jake Neighbors standing in front of the net. Hyman's got 5 goals on the power play, or on the power play throughout the postseason. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard are the ones that have had the most success. And to me, look, first of all, you have 2 world-class players in McDavid and Draisaitl, but that's a playmaker, that's a one-timer, and that's a power play quarterback. And Edmonton is finding success with it. And we talked so much about how the season turned around for the Blues once Drew Bannister started to get more from that power play. And we're trying to surgically fix this Blues team this offseason. You are going to have to figure out this power play. And I don't think Torrey Krug is your number 1 power play quarterback anymore. You have the playmaker in Robert Thomas, but you still do not have a one-timer. You thought maybe Kyrou, you thought maybe Booch, Snuggerud will be there sooner or later, but you need a power play threat or a one-timer threat on the power play to have success. And Edmonton and Florida are showing you that power plays matter.
Yeah, the reason you need the power play to be successful once you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs is, 1, there are fewer opportunities for it, so you need to take advantage of it. But 2, we've talked about this. There's just no time and space when it's 5-on-5 in the playoffs. The ice really shrinks when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It becomes a lot harder to try and win those games at 5-on-5. So you see the Edmonton Oilers that have this elite power play that is first in the Stanley Cup playoffs at 37.3% end up being the team that is in the Stanley Cup final because they're taking advantage of the opportunities. That's the only time really in the Stanley Cup playoffs when the ice opens up a bit, is when you're on that 5-on-4 advantage. And I think you're right. I think when you look at the Blues, yes, you need that net front presence. And yes, that is when the power play really kind of turned on its head and started to go the right direction for them this season when Bannister took over, when Jake Neighbors was the net front presence for them. But they still are missing those one-time shots. What made the power play successful when they went on the Cup run and even the year after that? It was Perron's one-time shot that they had on that left side flank there. Kyrou doesn't have a great one-time shot. He's got a nice wrist shot. I think he's got a great wrist shot. They just don't have a guy that has that threat. Thomas is the same way. Thomas is a guy that's more of a playmaker, has a really good shot, but does not have a one-time shot. And I'm kind of with you. I don't know if Torrey Krug is the guy that can quarterback a top power play unit anymore. I think he's probably now more served as a number 2 quarterback guy for that second unit. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe it is they just don't have the pieces around them. And maybe once they get those one-time shots, like when Snuggerud's here, you find out whoever the other one is. Maybe Krug ends up being a better power play quarterback. But I just don't see him as that guy right now at this point in his career. And if that's the case, it's hard to see the Blues doing any sort of deep playoff run when you don't have a power play that was very good, and your penalty kill, which was better, is another thing that has to be at the top of its game, because the Oilers and the Panthers are 1 and 2 in PK percentage so far in these playoffs on the penalty kill as well.
See, I think special teams is a way you can win, but I don't think it is necessarily the way you win. Because you look at last year, Vegas was 8th in the NHL in power play percentage in the playoffs. They had 22%. Florida, who made the Stanley Cup final last year, was 9th at 21%.
Yeah, well, remember when the Blues made their cup run, their power play was awful. People were begging to defer power plays.
Well, do you know who had the best power play percentage last year in the playoffs?
Edmonton.
At 46%.
Yeah. And they got bounced in the second round
exactly.
by Vegas.
Yeah. So it depends on how you want to win games. Like Colorado, another example in 2022. They finished the playoffs best power play percentage, 33%.
Yeah.
Like, you can win that way, but you better have the top 3 players in the league. You better have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nathan McKinnon.
I think the better way to put it is, and you're absolutely right, Grant, it has to be a weapon to use. It can't be the one that you thrive on. Because that's what Edmonton did last year.
It should be the thing that separates you from the team you're playing.
It should be the thing that the other team is hesitant to take a penalty and play that way, because you know that the power play is going to hurt you. But you can't go into a game expecting to get back into it because of the power play. And I do give credit to Edmonton. They have not played that way this season. And that's the other thing that I really thought of watching them play last night. Now, it's tough in this circumstance because Dallas just dominated the third period because they were trailing by 2, which totally makes sense. But there's no transition team anymore. Edmonton does not play transition hockey. They play possession hockey. And I think there's a difference between those two. Like, when you look at how the Blues played this past year, it was a lot of, we'll score off of the rush when you make mistakes. Edmonton didn't play like that, at least last night or in this postseason. It's been an awful lot of, we're going to get the puck and hold on to it, and you're going to have to take it from us. Frankly, it's really how Colorado had played for the longest time. And I think that's kind of I wonder if that's going to be the trend by the end of this postseason, as teams look at it and say, maybe we don't need to be the heaviest team. And we're going to find out which one prevails. Is it possession or is it heavy? Because Florida is a heavy team. But I don't know if it's the heaviness that wins games anymore. At least in the Western Conference, it sure seems like it's that possession style of hockey that Colorado plays and that Edmonton plays, because Edmonton found a way to take down the Vancouver Canucks. And Vancouver plays physical. They play the Craig Berube style. Colorado plays that way. Dallas found their way to beat that. I really think it comes down to possession hockey, at least in the Western Conference right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think when you look at the Oilers, a lot of people are going to think, well, that's a rush team that ended up getting to the Stanley Cup final. I don't think that's the case based on the way that they've played. I think you're spot on. I think it is more of holding possession in the offensive zone, not necessarily playing heavy, but just making sure that they possess the puck. And that was the one thing that you really saw with the Blues this past season that they've got to try and figure out a way to fix going into next year. It was a lot of one and done. You know, they never really held possession in the offensive zone that would really make you fearful of what they're doing, in which they hem you in, force you to wear out, and then they can make a couple of changes, bring on some fresh legs, and boom, they've got you trapped in the offensive zone. You didn't really see that from the St. Louis Blues, and that's where they've got to try. The one thing that they should be looking to emulate from the Oilers is that you're not going to get the Connor McDavid, you're not going to get the Leon Draisaitl, like that. Trying to replicate that is unprecedented. You're not going to be able to do that, but you can steal some of the stuff from their game, which is possess the puck in the offensive zone, wear down the defense. The same formula, essentially, that the 19 Cup run team had. You just don't have the superstars to do it like the McDavids and Draisaitl's.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the area of focus for a lot of teams at the end of this postseason. It's not going to be, we need to draft the McDavid and Draisaitl's. I think it's going to be, we need to turn our focus away from being this rough and tough team, and we need to focus more on how are we going to become a possession team to where other teams can't get the puck back, because that seems to be the formula, at least for how Edmonton's had success so far in this postseason. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. 15 minutes, we'll dive into the junk drawer. But coming up next, the Cardinals' defense is back to being a big problem. Can they overcome that? And it really feels like it's targeted to one player. We'll discuss that next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Over the weekend, the Cardinals dropped 2 of 3 against the Phillies. Last night, they beat the Phillies in that final game of that series to salvage 1 win out of the 3. Tonight, they'll start a series in Houston as they'll take on the Astros. Kyle Gibson will take the mound for the Cardinals. Justin Verlander for the Astros. It'll be a 7:10 first pitch from Minute Maid Park. For the Battlehawks this weekend, a huge win over the San Antonio Brahmas as they'll have home field advantage in the XFL Conference Championship this weekend against the Brahmas once again. That one will be at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. And for City SC, down in Miami this weekend, they played to a 3-3 draw with Inter Miami. Last night, the Edmonton Oilers took down the Dallas Stars as it'll now be the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final. That'll get started on the Saturday, the 8th, here on 101 ESPN. We'll carry the Stanley Cup Final, Game 1, on Saturday. I'm Grant France. The SportsCenter update has been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Real Muto bounces one down to Arenado. A low throw that gets by Goldschmidt. Bounces into the seats, and up to second goes the Philly catcher. As frustrating as things have been at the plate for Arenado this year, the defensive downfall has been just as angering to him. Harper gets a chance as a result of the air. Bad time to make it, giving this guy a chance to add on to the 4-1 score. Sends one in the air, deep to right field, and long gone. Upper deck home run, Bryce Harper. And the 2-out air hurts badly. 6-1 Phillies.
So that was the game Saturday, courtesy of Fox, as you heard them mention Nolan Arenado, who has had his fair share of struggles this season. But look, it's not just him. Mason Wynn, which kind of surprised me when I saw it, because I guess it's just been he's been so good at times that you forget. But he's had 9 errors this season, which is the most on the Cardinals, and it's the second most in Major League Baseball behind Alec Boehm, O'Neal Cruz, and Ellie De La Cruz. No coincidence that 2 of the other 3 in the top are shortstops, but Nolan Arenado with 6 of them, and you saw, at least you heard right there, how it hurt the team. Sunday, it really hurt the team in terms of 4 runs against Lance Lynn, and none of them were earned because of all of the errors that took place. The defense, if you look at where it stands in Major League Baseball, it's about league average in terms of the amount of errors that they've had. But it feels like it's cost the Cardinals more than it's cost other teams. And I just looked at this, T-Bone. The difference in terms of earned run versus runs allowed this season on the pitching, these are the teams that are in the same conversation as the Cardinals that have allowed 36 or more runs unearned than earned. It's the Cardinals at 36. Toronto and Boston are in the same conversation. Chicago, Cubs and White Sox, Oakland and the Mets are all the teams that have allowed more runs than earned runs against their pitchers, whether it be relief pitching or starting pitching. So it really has cost the Blues. It's cost the Cardinals a lot this season in terms of we could be talking about this team 4 or 5 games above 500 if not for the mistakes that are being made on the field, but then the results of when the errors are made, the pitching struggles to get out of those innings.
Yeah, and it's so odd because early on in the season we were raving about the defense. Remember before, the first month while the offense was really struggling, the reason they were able to stay in games was because their defense was playing well and their pitching was holding up and doing its job.
Right.
And then ever since that Angel series, things have really turned on its head for some reason. They went through that stretch of, I think it was 12 games in a row with an error. I looked this up last night because when they committed 3 errors, I was just in awe as to what I was watching. In the Cardinals' last 17 games, that dates back to that Angels series, they have committed 19 errors. So they're averaging more than 1 error per game. Now, granted, some games they've had a lot, like we saw last night. And that has led to 16 unearned runs. Wow. That's almost 1 unearned run per game. And then you add on top of it, one of the biggest difference so far is the left side of that infield. Nolan Arenado and Mason Wynn were a +2 in terms of outs above average, tracked by Baseball Savant back in March/April. Now, I didn't pull any of the numbers from June because it's going to be such a small sample size since it's just 2 games. But in the month of May, Arenado and Wynn were a combined -7 in terms of outs above average. And I've said this before, I'm not big on defensive metrics because they're just so hard, and we had Eno Saras tell us that they're hard to judge because it's such a smaller sample size, but that kind of matches the eye test. I don't think Nolan Arenado has been very good defensively in the last month plus. I thought he was very good early on in the season. I thought he was really good. I thought he was back to being 2022 Nolan Arenado defensively. Offensively, of course not. And Mason Wynn has played very well, and his range is very good. But as a rookie, you're going to get some mistakes from Mason Wynn, like that one last night. You've got to catch that ball at second base. You don't necessarily have to turn that double play, but you have to make sure you get that out at second base. But Arenado is the one that is just baffling to me. If he's not going to hit, he's got to provide Gold Glove level defense. That's the bare minimum that you have to expect out of Nolan Arenado. And so far, he hasn't been that. He's been terrible defensively for the St. Louis Cardinals. You look at any defensive metric, they're telling you that it's another down season for him in terms of his defense. And that's not what you expect from a Gold Glove caliber defender in Nolan Arenado. Last year, I could understand because he was dealing with injuries. And who knows, maybe he is dealing with injuries once again this season. But last year, even in his offseason, in terms of defensive runs saved, based on Baseball Info Solutions, he was a +1. Yeah. So far this season, he is a -7.
Jeez.
Which is just unfathomable. And right now, he's not providing much offensively for you. He's not hitting for any power, and he's not playing Gold Glove level defense. Nolan Arenado is a significant problem for the St. Louis Cardinals right now.
Yeah, I think one more on just the defensive struggles, because somebody texted in and said, "Oh, so now we're claiming Mason Wynn's not a Gold Glover." No, not at all. But what I'm saying is you are seeing, when the defense falters for the team, the pitching can't get out of it. And that's the part that's concerning, because a lot of teams that aren't the teams I listed, the Mets, the Athletics, the White Sox, the Cubs, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, you're hearing a trend with all of those teams. At least when you're giving up or when you're making errors, they're not turning into runs that are getting the pitcher or your team behind. They're finding ways to dig themselves out of it. So that's at least the concerning part right now for these errors that are taking place. But to the Arenado point, we were so, at least you and I were certain. I'm not ashamed to admit that BK was right. Maybe we shouldn't jump on this Nolan Arenado train after that Cincinnati Reds series, although I will blame Ollie for not playing him in that next one. But you get a home run and you're like, okay, he might be back. Even the next night, he gets a home run against Philly when he plays. But then after that, he goes 2 for 8 with 3 strikeouts and 1 walk. It just seems like the ups and downs of Nolan Arenado this season are, he'll get hot for maybe a game or two, and then it falls off. And it's hard to imagine if your best player not only is struggling, but becomes a little bit of a liability for you, how you can overcome that. Because it's not just that Nolan Arenado's not hitting for power and he's not having success at the plate. The defense is starting to struggle. And if both of those things come into play for the Cardinals, that's a hard thing to overcome.
Yeah, and a lot of people would say, hey, he had a decent series against Philadelphia Phillies. To me, those 2 singles that he had, they weren't hard hit balls. He didn't pull the ball. The bloop single in that game last night for one of those 2 hits, it just wasn't what you expect from Nolan Arenado, and it doesn't feel like it was the crescendo that we talked about.
Yeah.
And to your point on the defense with Nolan Arenado, look, if he's going to have struggles with his bat, maybe it is something where he's hit the aging curve, which even then is a little alarming because he's only 33. It's not like he's Goldie's age where he's past his 35 season. But can we get Gold Glove level defense at the corner from Nolan Arenado? That's what you need from him. That is, I would argue, his best attribute when the Cardinals acquired him was his defense. Not his bat. His bat was really good. His defense was the best thing that was a part of him as a player when you acquired him from the Colorado Rockies. In the last 2 seasons, it has really taken a hit. And I saw someone mention on our YouTube chat, Von Herrera is not throwing out base runners when he's behind the plate. He's like 2 for 32 or something like that. He's not been impressive behind the plate. I think his framing is fine. It's hard to tell it's hard to tell from the outside looking in how he calls a game, but I think for the most part he does that fairly well. We haven't heard any complaints about that.
Yeah.
But he can't seem to nab base runners, and some of that's on the pitch, but some of that is on him. This pitching staff, does not have a ton of wiggle room to where right now when they are making those mistakes, to your point, a lot of those when the defense makes mistakes, a lot of those runs are coming across. I expect that from this pitching staff. This pitching staff this defense cannot give up second chance opportunities to an offense, because I don't think the pitching staff is good enough to erase those opportunities. And you're really seeing that come full circle here in the last 20 games or so for the St. Louis Cardinals.
And that's part of the reason why it's just so hard to see the continued success from the Cardinals, because like we've always talked about, or at least I've always talked about, when one thing seems like it's starting to get fixed, the other side breaks, and you're going back and forth trying to get them all at the same time.
And I don't know about you, but I think the most frustrating part of it is it's on the infield where the problems are occurring.
And the left side of the infield.
Yeah, because I think when I think of the Cardinals and what they set out to do this offseason, it was we've got to fix the defense. Mm-hmm. The Cardinal way is a good defensive club. And the outfield, for the most part, has been pretty good. You know, you got Ciani, who's been Gold Glove caliber in center field.
Donovan's been great in left.
Donovan's been good in left. Newt was good when he was healthy.
Walker was good.
Walker was good when he was up with the club. Like, the outfield as a whole has been good. And as far as I can... Based on what I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of, like you saw last year, where it was thrown to the wrong base or not hitting the cutoff man. Like, they're doing the small things well. They're getting good jumps, which was a problem for them last year, especially when it came to center field defense. It's been the infield, and that is the one thing that I wasn't really expecting, because I expected Nolan Arenado to bounce back defensively. I expected Mason Wynn to play Gold Glove caliber defense. And look, I think his is more of, he's a rookie. He's kind of learning on the fly still. He may not win a Gold Glove this year. He's going to win a Gold Glove.
Absolutely.
I'm not worried about him long term. It is just a little surprising from what you've seen. You've seen a couple of blunders from Nolan Gorman. I think Goldie's been their best defensive infielder so far this season.
I think Mason Wynn's errors are more so of a young player who doesn't want to miss an out. Whereas, like last night felt like he had to get that double play.
I think he rushes.
That's what I mean. Last night he felt like he needed to get that double play, so you're not focused on getting the first out and then the next out. 3 years into the league, when you're playing that position, you know the focus is at second base. It's the same as Nolan Gorman grew. Gorman was okay last year, and this year it's gotten much better. But I'm with you. The two areas I would have said are going to be a casualty for you this season defensively was going to be your outfield and your catcher. And Wilson Contreras was awesome before he got hurt, and your outfield has been... I don't get the tight butt cheeks when a ball goes to the outfield like last season. It's been the left side of the field, which I can explain one. The other I don't think is easier to explain in Nolan Arenado. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get back into the Cardinals in the 1 o'clock hour, because there's one thing over the weekend. I know I'm doom and gloom right now after losing 2 of 3 to Philly. There was one thing that I looked at and I said, man, if you're going to build off of something as the Cardinals, it's this. So we'll get to that in about 15, but we got the junk drawer next year on 101 ESPN.
Guys, I miss Tommy Pham.
Why?
I miss him. You know, every time we
Because
talk
his offense.
Every time, well, that obviously. Every time we talk about the Cardinals, we're like, they need more pissed off attitude. They need more vinegar in their lineup. I think back to Tommy Pham. We all remember that one quote, right, from Tommy Pham back when I think it was 2018.
I don't remember what year
All
it
I
was.
remember is I was standing in the clubhouse with a microphone for KMOX in the huddle when they were talking about Tommy Pham, and he said this.
I mean, I've been in some real pain before. You know, I've been stabbed.
I looked around and I said, did this guy just say he's been stabbed? And then I think, followed up and we found out that, yeah, he was stabbed. So Tommy Pham, tough guy. I think we all can agree on that.
He's been stabbed again since that
he's been
moment.
stabbed like 3 times, I think, since. He's like the 50 Cent of baseball. Here's the thing, though. Tommy Pham topped that one over the weekend against the Milwaukee Brewers. If you missed it, it was a tag out at home plate with William Contreras and Tommy Pham. He slides into the base. He was out by a long shot. But as he stands up, Tommy Pham starts mouthing some things. And then, of course, the bench is clear like they always do in baseball. And then we got this golden gem afterwards.
1-run ball game, close play at the plate. And actually, it wasn't close. It was a shallow fly ball to left field. You would expect the left fielder to throw the base runner out on that play, but the situation of the game, third base coach sends you got to go. I'm nailed out at home by a mile. I'm going to the dugout, and I hear the tough guy with all the hoorah. So I'll never start anything, but I'll be prepared to finish it. There's a reason why, I do all kinds of fighting in the off season, because I'm prepared to somebody up. So you can take it as what it is.
So he was pissed off at his third base coach, if I'm understanding this correctly.
That's the thing I love, too, about this. Is like everybody's talking about that back part of this cut because the back part is so gold. Dude, he basically was like, I don't know what the hell our third base coach was doing. I was going to be thrown out at home.
But yeah, so he was pissed off at his third base coach, and then I guess he got even more mad when William Contreras was celebrating because they tagged him out.
He
He's
gave
like,
him, like, a little wave.
That hoorah stuff back to the dugout. But if you watch the video of this, Tommy Pham is walking back to the dugout, and he's shadow boxing the air because he is ready to fight. And then the quote that is, of all quotes from Tommy Pham, there's a reason why I do all kinds of fighting in the offseason, because I'm prepared to F somebody up. Tommy Pham is a gift to Major League Baseball.
Dude,
and get him off of the White Sox and put him on another contender.
I've said this before, the whole post-game locker stuff from the players, I typically find that it's fairly boring. You get a lot of the same answers. These guys are so well trained to deal with the media. If Tommy Pham is in a clubhouse, you never know what you're going to get. You could get a gold quote like that. You could get the gold quote of, I've been stabbed. Tommy Pham is the rare exception to my rule of, hey, the clubhouse stuff is pretty boring, and not very often do you get a gem. Not with Tommy Pham, because that is another gem from Tommy Pham in his post-game audio.
You think Tommy Pham can skate?
If he can't, you know what? At the time, even Cam Jansen would tell you that his skating wasn't great, but he was just going to go out there and hit somebody.
Did you think of the moment we had when I heard this quote from Tommy Pham, and he's like, there's a reason I take boxing so I can, bleep somebody up. Dude, when I heard that quote, the first thought that came into my mind was when we were at Blues Media Availability Day 1, and Jordan Cairo
told us he boxed.
He took boxing lessons. Yeah. And my first thought was, man, I wonder if Cairo has like the same attitude as Tommy Pham.
I'm telling you, go back and do yourself a favor and watch the video of Tommy Pham. He's walking off the field, still mouthing mother effer to the Milwaukee Brewers while he's just shadow boxing. That man is ready to mess somebody up. If you had the... I'm going to paint a scenario for you. You tell me who comes out the winner. Tommy Pham is on a team with Adrian Beltre. Beltre just hits a home run. Walks into the dugout. Tommy Pham grabs him and messes with his head. Who wins that fight?
Oh, I'd go Beltre.
I would go Tommy Pham any day of the week. That man has seen some stuff.
Has Beltre been stabbed?
No. Well, not that I know of. But I would go Beltre. That dude was that guy was fiery as well.
I'm just telling you. A 280 batting average with a 331 on base. Well, not great, but a 109 OPS plus.
Cardinals won one.
And the quote that says, there's a reason why I do all kinds of fighting in the offseason, because I'm prepared to F somebody up.
That's the player. That is the secret weapon that the Cardinals are missing right now.
And I just can't even figure out why he's all that upset. He was out by a mile, and I get
he's pissed off his third base coach.
He plays for the White Sox.
That's true.
So.
And that's the thing too is it'd be one thing if he was on a team with expectations. It'd be one thing if he was on the Phillies, who are supposed to win the World Series. Dude, you're on a team that's supposed to lose 110 games. What are we getting upset about? And maybe Contreras was talking trash that you don't see. But he was just doing a slight wave with the glove. He's excited. They just made a great play. What are you so upset about?
It's like when what's-his-face slid into second and you just threw a right. Jose Bautista just throws a right.
Yeah.
No, it was...
it was Bautista.
He didn't throw the right hook. He took the right hook from the second baseman, Rougned Odor. Just awesome. So, Tommy fam, let's keep up what you're doing, and I'm going to hope he gets traded to a contender by the trade deadline this year. With Tanner Hendrickson, God, that would be awesome. Dodger, or he makes perfect sense for the Phillies as just a bench bat who was just chirping the entire side. But at least he's going to go out there and back it up. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. None of the young players are doing what Tommy Pham's doing, but they are doing a couple of things that's impressing me, and I'll tell you why coming up next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. When it comes to her and her team, they take care of you and your family and what's important, and that's your car and your home insurance. And look, what I love about Tracy, really a lot of things I love about Tracy, but the main thing is the customer service that you get. She's always available for you. We had a scenario, I think it was about 2 months ago, when those storms, the spring storms were coming in. It blew one of our tree limbs down, and it landed on top of our shed. And I'm thinking, oh no, what are we going to have to do here? So I called Tracy up, and we've all been in that scenario, right, where you call your insurance and you wait 2 weeks, you don't get a response, and you're thinking, fine, I'll do this myself. I called Tracy that night, and she answered, and we had the problem solved by the next day. So get with somebody who's there to take care of you. She preaches. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's when something happens. And when it does, Tracy's there to answer your call. Give her a call today and tell her Alex Ferrario sent you. You heard it here on 101 ESPN. She'll walk you through a free non-committal quote. Super simple. She'll take care of the whole process. 314-328-4260. Again, that's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Next pitch, that ball is lifted high, deep. Castellanos, corner, track, watching, and that ball is gone. He's going. This ball is driven to right. Forget it. Alec Burleson, no doubt about it, off the facing of the second deck. And the second shot given up by Walker is 4-2 Cardinals. This one is into right field. It's going to bring in the go-ahead run. What a job by Nolan Gorman as he takes the lefty Soto into right, and the Cardinals grab a lead 5-4.
So I understand, and I know who I am. I'm a pretty negative guy from about April until August, and then it's just, positivity with Blues talk. And I feel like I've been doom and gloom today, so let's paint a little positivity into our show. Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Yes, the Cardinals lost 2 of 3 against the Phillies. Yes, I feel like I've been solidified in the fact that I know who this Cardinals team is. But there was a positive that I took away from this weekend against the Phillies, and that is the fact that you are seeing the young core take over this team. Because you lost this weekend to Philadelphia, you score 2 runs against the Phillies on Friday. You get 1 against them on Saturday. And then, of course, you had that victory 5-4 in extras yesterday. And I need to correct myself from earlier. I said they trailed in the first 2 innings every single game. They didn't. They were tied in that game on Sunday against the Phillies. Wynn, Burleson, Nolan Gorman, Ivan Herrera, these 4 guys were the stars of the weekend, in my opinion, for the Cardinals. You had the bomb from Nolan Gorman that brought the Cardinals back into that game. You had Mason Wynn coming through with big RBI hits multiple times. Alec Burleson doing the exact same thing. And even Ivan Herrera picking up a few hits in the game. We spend so much time talking about Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. If these guys don't hit, then they're not going to have success. And although that is a very true statement, this season, it feels like the parallel lines are crossing over each other to where it's, hey, you're seeing Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado ride off into the sunset while you're seeing Mason Wynn, Nolan Gorman, Alec Burleson, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, and hopes of Jordan Walker by the end of the season take over and say, we've got this from here. Because against the Phillies, against that type of pitching and that bullpen that is really good, to come away with a bomb by Nolan Gorman, a bomb by Alec Burleson, multiple RBI hits by Mason Wynn, getting on base, showcasing the defense with the exception of the couple of errors, that felt good as a Cardinals fan. Because a month ago, I didn't feel like you had a new core. I felt like you were still searching for one. I've already seen 3 new members within the last couple of weeks take control of this team and help them get back to close to 500.
Yeah, and it's not the first series they've really seen this against a really good team. Remember the Baltimore series? All those guys that you just mentioned there played fairly well as well. So I didn't really think about it much until you brought this to my attention last night, and then the more I thought about it, you're right. The young core was the one that was the positive trend from the series. I think Goldie was fine overall against the Philadelphia Phillies. Arenado was okay. He didn't hit he hit the 1 home run, which was good to see, but then he had 2 bloop singles really that weren't hit that hard. Right. But you're right about the young core. I mean, Burley looked really good. And he had some tough luck in that series as well. Absolutely. He hit the ball fairly well. Mason Wynn almost hit a game. I don't remember if it was a go-ahead home run in the 9th. Just went foul, missed it by like 4 feet. He looked pretty good at the plate for the most part. I think
BK was the one that texted us. Like, if they would have called that fair in the moment, I think it probably would have stayed fair.
Yeah, and then you have Herrera, who has the 2 doubles in the series as well. Like, it is nice to see the young core playing well because that was it wasn't a critical series, but it was a series that was a kind of judgment series of where are the St. Louis Cardinals at this point? And you're going up against one of the best teams, if not the best team in the National League, in the Philadelphia Phillies, and the young guys hold their own. And Goldie and Arenado weren't the storyline, and though I still believe that those guys have to hit for me to really buy into what the Cardinals are, it is nice to see now that those question marks that what you brought up in the first month was, okay, does Nolan Gorman have to go down? Why is Brendan Donovan struggling? What is up with Lars Nootbaar? Is Alec Burleson, is this what he's going to be this season? Is Ivan Herrera going to be sustainable? And now that you've seen that first month looks more like a just month-long struggle, this is now starting to see what you kind of expected. Gorman is starting to hit for power and doing so with authority. Alec Burleson is still being an all-around bat that is good with hitting contact. Ivan Herrera has pop in his bat. Mason Wynn continues to be be the guy that you saw in the first month that is hitting for average, getting on base. This is a good sign for the Cardinals' young core that you're seeing them perform at the highest levels as well, not just doing this against the bottom dwellers in baseball, but doing it against one of the best teams in the National League in the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I tried to come up with a comp of the Cardinals to where the last time they were in this position. And I guess the last time you could be talking about this is when like Colton Wong really started to play a lot more, and Harrison Bader and Piscotty and Randall Grichuk, and you felt like, hey, you're starting to see the new core form itself for the Cardinals. Now, obviously that didn't work out for them, and they had to readjust and reassemble their roster. But you and I are on the same page. And I know BK differs with this. You still need a middle-of-the-order bat. You still need an MVP if you're going to have success. And I don't believe any of these guys that we've just discussed have MVP caliber in them. But I do think if you're looking at how Philadelphia forms their roster, to have guys like Alec Boehm and Bryson Stott and Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos and Marsh, like to have, and JT Realmuto, to have all of those guys surrounding Bryce Harper, that's how you get to that point. And at least it felt like after that series, you can see where Burleson can be somewhat of a Nick Castellanos for you, or Nolan Gorman can be Kyle Schwarber for you, or Mason Wynn be a Bryson Stott for you. You're getting those complementary pieces, which, again, a month ago, I felt like Gorman was going to be a month of a hot streak and then bad for a couple of months. I thought Burleson was just going to be a fourth outfielder that couldn't hit for any pop. And now I'm talking about how you have to have these five guys in the lineup on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I still think you're going to see Gorman go through those long cold spells.
Schwarber does too, and it's important.
Exactly. It's just who he is.
Right.
But you know what would be nice is by the end of the season, you can say, you know what, I can write in pen I'm going to get 30 home runs from Nolan Gorman.
Right.
I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but I know I'm going to get 30 home runs from him. And I'll throw another name out here. He's not on the position player side, but it was encouraging to see him kind of showcase some, if you want to call it swagger, showcase more confidence in him in the bullpen. It was Matthew Liberatore this weekend.
That was a big one.
Dude, Libby was awesome this weekend for the St. Louis Cardinals out of the bullpen. Appeared in 2 games, covered 2 1/3 innings pitch, and had 5 strikeouts, no earned runs, no walks, and no hits. His strikeouts, it wasn't like he was going against the bottom of the order either. You know, it wasn't like he was striking out the guys that are hitting like 8 and 9 for him. Struck out Schwarber once, struck out Bryce Harper twice, and he struck out Brandon Marsh once, who was, I think, hitting 5 or 6 in yesterday's game. Like, that's legitimate stuff right there for Matthew Liberatore. And it just shows that he's the bullpen arm. He's just a bullpen arm. Yeah. He cannot be a swingman. He is just a bullpen arm at this point in his career, and that is fine. And I'm glad to see that the St. Louis Cardinals, now that they're trying Palante, worked out for a start and hopefully works out long-term, can finally get him back into this role, because Matthew Liberatore is a left-handed specialist. Now, it's harder to get him into games because of the 3-batter minimum. If you didn't have the 3-batter minimum, he would be like Randy Choate, where he could have a baseball career for a very long time because he can get left-handed batters out specifically. He has a role on this team. As long as you just keep him in the bullpen, will he be able to find success?
If the Cardinals say that Matthew Liberatore is making another start this season, I will crush them. Because you know what his role is now. You've established what his role is. And I'm not just saying that. Lance Lynn said that last night after the game. This was his quote from John Denton. It's the bullpen excellence and his fielding errors from the 5th inning. He said, with Matthew Liberatore being back down there and also John King and JoJo Romero being awesome, it's shaping up very nice in that bullpen. We've got to make sure we give it to them in the 6th or 7th inning and not give them the cluster bleep that I did. But with those guys coming out of the bullpen, they lock things down. Matthew Liberatore is no longer a fill-in starting pitcher. There's no more of, we got to see what he's got. Do that in the offseason. He is a shutdown reliever for you that goes into one of the 4 guys coming out of that bullpen that I trust no matter what. He showcased it against some of the best, and he's right up there with JoJo Romero, Andrew Kittredge, and Ryan Helsley. And if he goes back into that rotation at all this season, that is going to be malpractice on the Cardinals' part.
Yeah, it really would be. And for him, now that he is back in the bullpen and you saw this performance over the weekend, I think there was a lack of trust the first time that he went back to the bullpen. I think the Cardinals wanted to wait and see, get him in the right situations and see if he could still be effective, see if he didn't lose any confidence from his time as a starter where he makes right-handed batters look like Babe Ruth or Barry Bonds. But now that you saw it this weekend against some of the best left-handed bats in all of baseball, now they can go ahead and utilize them, and there's going to be chances against Houston. They've got some really good left-handed bats in Kyle Tucker. They've also got Yordan Alvarez. Like, there's two legitimate lefties, and if he can be a guy that helps stabilize them, Cardinals have three legitimate left-handed relievers in their bullpen. They do it in different ways. Jojo Romero has some of the filthiest stuff in baseball. Matthew Liberatore doesn't have as filthy stuff, but he's got strikeout stuff against lefties. And then John King is a ground ball specialist when he goes up against lefties. If there's a spot where you need a double play, he's now like in the Seth Maness role, but he's left-handed, to where you know that he can get a double play ball for you, or at least get the ball on the ground. They've got the left side of their bullpen figured out. I think they need one more right-handed arm. Unless Fernandez really continues to showcase himself, then I'd hear an argument that they've got the right side figured out. But the bullpen is piecing together nicely and looks like a playoff caliber bullpen right now.
He's Tanner Hendricks and I'm Alex Ferrario. We've got in or out coming up next. You send us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are in or out. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646 here on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. You could text in your in or out scenarios here on 101 ESPN. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are in or out. Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's start with this one, boys. In or out? The Cardinals do not win a game in the wild card this year.
Well, when we win the division and have the bye.
Okay. Okay, tough guy.
I will say out, and there's only one reason I will say that. I think with Sonny Gray, you give yourself a chance. And with the bullpen, you give yourself a chance to win at least a game, if not that series.
Can't win a game when you scored 0 runs.
They scored runs against Philly. Best of 3, anything can happen. And I truly believe that, and I know nobody wants to hear that. But I think with Sonny Gray, you can win a game, and then with the bullpen that you have, the back end can, A, close out Sonny's game, and B, even as constructed now, even though I think they're going to have to add another bullpen arm, you can shorten game 2 or game 3. They could potentially get through. Now, once I get past that, it's going to be tough. But I would say I am out on this. I think they could win at least 1 game, if not 2.
I think I'm going to go the same route as you, T-Bone. I think this is probably the worst the offense is going to be this season. This is the sort of the slump for them. Hopefully it picks up towards the back half of the season, and they can carry that into the wild card round. So I'm going to say they win at least 1 game in that round.
You guys need to take your Cardinals homer glasses off. I'm saying in on this. I don't think they win one. I think
fairly critical of them today.
I know. I'm sorry. I did a positive segment this last one. I look at it as I don't know if the offense can do it in the spotlight like that. It's different in the regular season than the postseason for me. And until I see it, that'll be when I can actually believe in it, which, of course, that's when I'll jump on the bandwagon. T-Bone?
Guys, in or out, we will see Nolan Gorman get to 35 home runs this season. He is currently sitting at 11.
Man, I'm going to say out still, because I know as great as he is right now, you are going to get that slump at some point. I do think he gets to a 30, though. I just don't know if 35 is, like, I can see 30 to 32. 35 feels like you need a little bit more consistency from Nolan Gorman. But from what I've seen this season, I think by next year, you're talking about a guy who could hit 35 to 40.
I really want to go in on this because, again, the potential is there, but I just don't. I'm with Alex. I don't see it this season for him.
I'm going to say in. And I was kind of with you guys when I was thinking of this in my head. I was like, okay, he's kind of inconsistent, so he may not be able to get to 35. But we would agree he's been inconsistent this season, right? Like, he's currently in a hot stretch, and he was very cold early on. You know what he's on pace for per a 162-game pace for home runs?
33?
32?
36.
Really?
Wow.
He's currently on pace to get right around this 35 mark, even through his inconsistencies. So I would say I am in on this. I think he can get there. It will probably be like right at 35. He will probably not get to my T-Bone 3 projection of 40, but I'll take 35. It'll make me feel a little bit better.
Now, he's been pretty healthy so far this season.
That's the other thing, too.
So hopefully that sustains.
He did cut out the popcorn, though.
That's true. I'd have to go back and look. I feel like since he's been healthier through the first 2 months this season, it feels like it's going to be sustainable. Because I felt like last year you were already starting to see where there'd be a game or two where he'd have to sit for a back injury. My memory could be totally wrong on that. I'd have to go back and look at that. But I feel like because he's been healthy through the first 2 months, we've heard of no back issues. They must have really got – he might have the best room in the team road trips. But I think because he's been healthy through the first 2 months of the season, that's probably going to sustain in terms of his back.
Great.
I'm going to go to the Stanley Cup final, in or out, that the Oilers power play dries up in the final.
I'm going to go out.
I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead, T-Bone. Explain it.
Florida has one of the best penalty kills in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now, but we just talked about their power play earlier and the importance of it and what it's led to in their run of they're not relying on it to win games. It's helping separate them from games. I just think there's too much talent on that power play. There's a reason it's been so successful in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's not a fluke. It's because the power play is that great. I don't think it's going to dry up, and I think it's what gives them a fighting chance against Florida. I still think Florida ends up wiping the floor with them, but I think the power play is what gives them a chance in this series.
Yeah, I'm going to say in on this because I don't think there's going to be as many power play chances as we typically do. And you're talking about a group that's like clipping almost at a 40% number. I don't know if you're going to get that many opportunities. And if you're only getting 1 or 2 a game,
And I know last night they capitalized on it, but Ottinger kind of, he stunk a little bit in those last couple of games. Like, he let a lot past him that you probably shouldn't have. And Sergei Bobrovsky, for all of my faults against him, he's been pretty good. So I just don't know how many power plays you're going to see in this postseason, and I don't think they're going to be as successful as they have been. And especially, Florida's a heavy team, and I just don't. I'll be really curious to see how they perform against a team that does that on the penalty kill.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a different beast going up against Florida for Edmonton. Dallas finished the playoffs the 11th out of 16 teams in PK percentage. Now, a lot of that has to do with Edmonton being good on the power play in this past series, but still, I think if you're comparing Florida to Dallas, Florida's miles ahead of Dallas, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for Edmonton, especially starting out the series, transitioning from going up against a penalty kill like Dallas to a penalty kill like Florida.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how many power plays there were in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year between these two teams. So 36 power plays in 11 games. So you're talking about around 3 per game. I don't know. I just don't know. I'll be really curious of how Edmonton does if they're only getting a couple of them. Now, here's the thing: Florida could just be dumb and take a ton of penalties again, and if you get them warmed up, they're gonna strike on you. So it's just going to be a matter of how both sides play in this one. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Fellas, in or out from the 618. The Cardinals are in a playoff spot by the All-Star break, and they make a trade for a playoff game starter.
I'll go in on this. I think right now they probably are the third best team in this wild card race. Now, again, that doesn't say a lot. This wild card race is going to be close, everybody. Reminder, it's not good baseball. It's bad baseball. But I'll say in on this, and I can see them making a trade for a playoff starting arm. Now, as the Cardinals have taught us over the last, 3 seasons, that doesn't necessarily mean it's Jesus Luzardo.
Yeah, I was going to say Jose Quintana started in game 1. So
Quintana, it could be a Jordan Montgomery type. Hell, it could be Jordan Montgomery if Arizona falls out of it.
Nice.
It could be a John Lester / Jay Happ, who is probably going to start a game for them in 2021. I think they're going to make a trade for a starter, a bullpen arm. I think those are the two things they're going to be looking for at the deadline. So I would say I am in on this by the All-Star break.
I'm going to go in on the first part, out on the second. I don't think they'll trade for a starting pitcher. I think they just trade for bullpen pieces. That's what I feel like they'll be comfortable with their starting rotation going into the playoffs, whether that's correct or incorrect, which I would say it's incorrect, but from their perspective, I think they're going to be comfortable with their rotation.
Yeah, I would say I'm out on both. I think they'll be close to a playoff spot. I don't know if they'll be sitting in one, but they'll be around it because the National League is what it is. But I'm with Grant. I don't think they're going to trade for a starter. I think they'll look at it as, well, Michaelis is improving. We've got Lynn. We've got Gibson. Matz is coming back. We need more bullpen help. And I wonder if they'll bring in another bat, too. I just don't know if they'll make a trade for a starter.
Yeah, if you would have told me a number 2 starter, a number 2 or a number 1, however you want to classify him, I would have definitely said out on that part. But I can see them trading for somebody that starts a game in the playoffs for them.
In or out, the Phillies and Dodgers will meet in the championship series this year.
Oh, I am going to say out just because we've seen that teams have a very tough time adjusting to having the bye. And I think you're going to see the Dodgers, and I think you're going to see the Phillies end up with the bye this season. One of them, I think, can probably advance through it. I don't know about both of them, just because we've seen it. It's very difficult for these teams to keep their timing going. Jim Bowden mentioned that to us when we talked to him last week. It's tough for these teams when they have 5 days off to keep their offensive pieces with their timing at the plate. I think both those teams have great rosters, and as long as they stay healthy for the most part, they should be, on paper, the best 2 teams that should meet up in the NLCS. But just based on what we've seen in the couple of years with this third wildcard team, I'm going to say out because I think one of them will get bounced in the DS.
I'm with you. I think it'll be the Phillies that make it back. I just feel like there's always a surprise team that ends up in the Final Four. And in the NL, which is so weird this season, I think that's what's going to happen. Is there's going to be a team that you don't expect, just like Arizona last year, that makes it into that the Final Four.
What does it say that we're all in agreement that the Phillies are going to be the team that gets there, not the Dodgers?
I don't know.
I mean, that's not good. If you're the Dodgers, you got Freeman, Betts, and Ohtani, and we don't believe they're going to get there.
Yeah, the Dodgers are so tough to figure out because Freeman and Betts last year were the reason that they kind of fell out of it because those guys didn't hit in the postseason. Now, granted, they didn't have as good pitching as they have this
pitching
year.
faltered, and now they got Glass now.
Yeah, they've got Glass now. They'll have Kershaw probably at that point. They have Buehler that is back. You'll have
Bobby Miller.
Like, their pitching's better than it was last year, and the reason I say that because you know who started a playoff game for them last year? Lance Lynn.
Oh, well, good on the Cardinals. That's your game 2 starter.
Yeah, their pitching is better this year. Philly's got really good pitching. It's just a matter of do those offenses find their timing back. And, like, Shohei looks like a guy that could roll out of bed and smash 3 home runs. Like, I'm not worried about his bat going cold.
Okay, a couple more on the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. In or out, the Blues should pursue Capo Caco from the Rangers. For those that are wondering, 23-year-old, second overall pick back in 2019 in the postseason, 15 games, 2 points.
I think it depends on what you'd have to give up for him, which I think that's a cop-out. But
no, I agree. I'm not giving up Jake Neighbors for him.
Right. I honestly, at this point, don't think you'd have to give up too much because he's kind of been underwhelming. Like in the playoffs, he didn't really do anything. So, I mean, if you can go out and you don't have to give up much to go get a Capo Caco, I wouldn't hate it. But I also, like you said, I wouldn't be giving up a guy like Jake Neighbors or a proven NHL player for Capo Caco.
Yeah, I don't know if you necessarily need this guy. So I would say out on this. I don't think you need to go trade for him. I understand he had a 40-point season last year. This year, underwhelming in his 61 games at 19 points. Seems to have fallen out of favor. Maybe if you're the Blues and you say, we can get him for on the cheap, they're selling low on him, maybe you do end up taking a flyer on him because he fits kind of in your timeline at 23 years of age. But based on what we've seen, I just don't know if he's going to end up living to the hype of a second overall pick. So I would say out.
Capo Caco this season in the playoffs, 15 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, -4 an average, 12 minutes of ice time per game.
Yeah,
he didn't do anything.
Out. I'm out. I think that's more along the lines of he's just not going to be the play. That feels a lot like Nail Yakupov than it does Alexis Lafreniere, who had success the following season where he was underperforming. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get back into the NHL because both of these teams that we are going to see in the Stanley Cup final are a reminder of the importance of a top line. But what's going to be the difference? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Over the weekend, the Cardinals dropped 2 of 3 in Philadelphia. They salvaged a win last night in that final game of the series. They'll be in action tonight, starting off a series against the Houston Astros. It'll be a 7:10 first pitch from Minute Maid Park. The Battlehawks over the weekend, they won their conference as they will have dome field advantage in the playoffs. They beat the Brahmas 13-12. It'll be a rematch in the conference championship game between the Battlehawks and the Brahmas on Sunday. And for City SC, they played to a 3-3 draw down in Miami with Inter Miami. In the NHL playoffs, the Stanley Cup finals are set as of last night. It'll be the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers, and we will have that coverage for you here on 101 ESPN. The Stanley Cup final starting on Saturday. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy. Together, we drive. Are you kidding me?
Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario, as the Oilers and Panthers will be in the Stanley Cup final this year. And watching them throughout this postseason run, we talked a lot, T-Bone, this season for the Blues of the top line and what it looks like and if you have a top line. Now, comparing it to what the Edmonton Oilers have is night and day. But I think both of these teams that are going to be playing for the Stanley Cup final are proving the importance of having a top line. Obviously, Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Zach Hyman, that's that number one line. And then you toss in Leon Draisaitl, who plays on it occasionally in games. And then you've got the Florida Panthers who do the same. And Barkov and Reinhart and Tkachuk and Verhaeghe, those four guys kind of rotate. They've led their teams. The other night, or last night against Dallas, the power play was successful, but it was your top line. Florida at even strength against the Rangers. The top line shut it down with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart. They're showcasing the necessity of having a top line, but I also think the difference in these two teams is how much you rely on that top line. And what I mean by that is listen to some of these numbers. And this is why I truly believe Edmonton is going to be lucky to win one game. I think Florida's got the major upper hand in this series. The top line in terms of points for the Edmonton Oilers, you've got Connor McDavid with 31, Leon Draisaitl with 28, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with 20, Zach Hyman with 18. Those four are the guys that play primarily on your top line. The next closest player in terms of points is Evander Kane, who has 8 points in 18 games. There is a 10-point drop-off from your top four players and the next guy down. Meanwhile, if you go to the Florida Panthers, you go from top to bottom with their players, 19 points, 17 points, 17 points, 12 points, 12 points, 11 points, 10 points, 9 points. There is more depth in terms of relying on other lines to come through big than what there is for the Edmonton Oilers. You need a number one line that can find ways to overcome the other team's best shutdown defensemen. But at some point, your luck runs out with those matchups. And when you take on a team that has depth from top to bottom, that's when you start to see the trend towards what works in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think when you look at these teams and their top lines, it's no coincidence that we're talking about their top line, because when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, your top line has to be your best line, and they have to be elite at something. You know, you look at the Oilers, they almost feel more like an odd exemption to me, because really when I think of the Oilers, what do I think is being elite? I just think of Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really think of the other guys that are on that line to be, you know, that elite of players. But I think your top line has to be one of two things when you look at it when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It either has to be an elite goal-scoring line that can make a difference when they are on the ice, or it has to be like the O'Reilly line, which you saw in the 19 Cup run, which is they were not technical. I wouldn't call that O'Reilly, Perron, and I think it was Sanford, if I remember correctly, line to be elite offensively. But holy crap, were they tough to go up against when they were on the ice. They were the perfect shutdown line for the St. Louis Blues. And I think you've got to have one of two things for that when you get into the playoffs. You can't have any question marks on the top line. The Blues clearly had question marks as to what the wingers looked like around Robert Thomas this season. And you got to be either really good offensively or you have to be really great defensively. There cannot be any question about that. You have to be elite at one of those two things as a top line when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs if you're going to be the driving force to get your team through to the next round.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like Edmonton absolutely is going to have the upper hand. And to T-Bone's point, you see the differences. You got a shutdown line that is the Florida Panthers top line with Barkov and Sam Reinhart. Although they do score a lot of goals, they have the ability to eliminate the other team's top line. Whereas you don't have the same depth in terms of from your top line down that the Edmonton Oilers have had success with. Now, they have depth in terms of guys you can rely on defensively, but offensively, I think that's where the difference really comes through. And then, of course, the other one is goaltending. And you've got one guy that I feel like everybody knows in hockey, and Sergei Bobrovsky. It's been one that is talked a lot about. Gets paid $10 million, never got a Stanley Cup championship, but he continuously takes his team deep into the playoffs, whether it was with Florida or when he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And you've got another goaltender that prior to this season, I'm sure if you asked the common hockey fan who Stuart Skinner was, they would be like T-Bone and say, oh, yeah, Jeff Skinner. Two different people.
We didn't have to bring up
I know,
that
I'm sorry.
part.
I'm sorry. Hey, you know what? We're an open book here.
That was like a BK problem.
It's true. You're not wrong there. But I say that because a lot of people did not know who Stuart Skinner was. And Stuart Skinner now is viewed as a guy that could take Edmonton to its first Stanley Cup championship. T-Bone, you brought this up. I still don't know how to define goaltending in the National Hockey League. It's the number one priority if you want to win a Stanley Cup. But how do you prioritize from winning a Stanley Cup with Darcy Kemper and winning a Stanley Cup with Andrei Vasilevsky?
But here's the difference with Darcy Kemper, and when you make the argument that goaltending isn't as important as we make it out to be, everybody goes back to that Colorado Avalanche team with Darcy Kemper. But that team had everything. They were elite everywhere else. They had Cale Makar. They had Devon Taves. They had the defense that was deep. Then their forwards, they had the superstars. You had Rantanen and McKinnon. On top of having those two, the depth of scoring with which you just talked about Edmonton not really having. Nazem Kadri, Andrei Burakovsky, Gabe Landeskog, Val Nichushkin, JT Compher. Go down the list. They had a ton of scoring depth. And if you're not going to have goaltending, you almost have to be perfect everywhere else. That's what that Colorado team was. They were pretty much perfect everywhere else aside from that goaltending position. To me, Edmonton isn't like that. They've got the superstars. They've got that top defenseman with Evan Bouchard. They don't really have that scoring depth that can do what the Colorado Avalanche did for them when they won the Stanley Cup and help carry them when it dries up elsewhere.
Yeah, it feels like, when we talked about with puck possession, that's how Colorado had so much success. The goal was to keep the puck out of their own zone so Darcy Kemper didn't have to make saves. Now, he made them when he needed to, but you just needed to make sure you possess the puck more than the others. Whereas if you're Tampa, you're fine giving up the puck. You're fine taking chances because you know your goaltender can make the saves. That's the part that I think is still unknown with Stuart Skinner and why goaltending is such an up and down thing. Unless you've got the guy that you trust when the other team gets an odd man rush or a breakaway to make the save, you can't play to the level that you want to play to.
Yeah, and this is the third year in a row in which I would say there's a goaltender in the Stanley Cup playoffs the Stanley Cup finals that I look at and I go, I can see why the league doesn't value this position as much because these three guys aren't guys that I would look at and say, oh, they're like top five at their craft. It's not like saying like the Kansas City Chiefs who had like the best defense in the NFL. Well, yeah, they also had the best quarterback in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes. He gets them to the Super Bowl. The defense got them to the Super Bowl. Stuart Skinner's not a household name. He doesn't even have a 900 save percentage in these playoffs.
Yeah.
Aiden Hill wasn't really that guy. Now, he had a better run in the playoffs than Skinner did, and Darcy Kemper wasn't good in the run that Colorado had 3 years ago. What this tells me is I can see why the league doesn't put value on this position, even though it is arguably the most important position in the NHL. It's because teams keep getting away with it. Teams keep getting away with having a Stuart Skinner in goal. They keep getting away with a Darcy Kemper in goal. And it's why, even if the Blues wanted to trade Jordan Binnington this offseason, and I don't think they want to, and I don't think they plan to. I don't think they'd get a lot for Jordan Binnington. Even though he is a proven playoff performer, I can see how teams are looking at this going, well, why would I want Jordan Binnington and have to give something up for him when I can piece this together with a Stuart Skinner, a Aiden Hill, or a Darcy Kemper?
See, but the thing about Aiden Hill is, and I just looked this up, amongst goaltenders last season in the playoffs that played at least 5 games, Aiden Hill had a .932 save percentage, leading all goaltenders in the playoffs last season.
Yeah.
I know Aiden Hill isn't necessarily a, Andrei Vasilevsky or a Sergei Bobrovsky or, a name that's well known. But the fact of the matter is that last season he had an amazing playoffs for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, well, and to what you said, T-Bone, the reason you don't try and piece it together is who the Edmonton Oilers have been. These are some of the goaltenders that they've used since Connor McDavid. Anders Nilsson, Al Montoya, Anthony Stolarz, Mikko Koskinen, Mike Smith, Jack Campbell, Calvin Pickard. They've tried to piece it together with other guys and say, oh, well, this guy could get the job done for us. And it took them 10 goaltenders in a matter of 8 seasons to find the one that can get it done. Now, sometimes you're like the Blues and you find Jordan Binnington and you're like, whoa, where'd this come from? Or you're in Colorado and you're like, hey, we could just find any random goaltender and put him in there. We'll be good. But when you try that, the problem is when that goaltender costs you games, that's when you made the wrong mistake.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing now, because Jordan Binnington making $6.5 million, I think what you're seeing teams do is say, look, we're seeing a Stuart Skinner. Aiden Hill may be more of the exception to this than what I'm giving him credit for. Same with, but Darcy Kemper was not good in that run. I think what you're seeing, our teams are saying to what you said, Grant, earlier of let's focus more on having possession of the puck, keeping it away from our end of the ice, and which we talked about earlier in the show. I think you're going to see more teams, if they're not already doing this, pushing towards that model, because then you can spend more money on your forward group. You can spend more money on your defensive core. Stuart Skinner's making $2.6 million. Yep. And he's not even, he doesn't even have a 900 save percent. It's not like he's playing well in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He was good last night when they needed him to be, which is an important caveat here. As long as you perform at that big moment, that big game. But if you only have to spend 2.96% of your cap space on one goaltender that you can ride in the playoffs, you can then allocate more of your money towards your forward group, your defensive group, and you don't have to really worry about it because you've proven that you can win without necessarily having one of the top 5 goalies in the NHL.
And the funny thing is that on the other side of this final, you've got Sergei Bobrovsky, who's making what, $11 million a year?
$11 million, and has been viewed prior to last season a choke artist, mostly in the National Hockey League, and now he's going to have another opportunity to win a Stanley Cup. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, Alex Ferrario will hit the rewind and give away Bud Bash tickets next year on 101 ESPN. I pulled a BK on the last segment of the day where I gave myself like 2 minutes, so we'll just wrap it up quick with this one. We'll give you an opportunity to win some Bud Bash tickets coming up in just about a minute or so, but alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll wrap it up where we started it. The Cardinals do fall in 2 of 3 games against the Philadelphia Phillies, and T-Bone, like we talked at the top of the hour, it didn't change my opinion at all about the Cardinals. In fact, it solidified what I thought of them as a middling team. Can they be in the playoffs? Absolutely. But I don't think they're anything more than that, and they showcased that against a really good World Series contending team.
Yeah, I'm with you. To me, they're a middling team. I can't really grade the offense because you're missing 3 of your most important bats. I thought the bullpen was excellent. You have a playoff caliber bullpen right
Absolutely.
now, even though Middleton's probably done for the year. The rotation was disappointing to me. The rotation has to be better, and the defense has to be better. Those are the 2 things that you really need to see improve here in the next couple of months to be a playoff threat, I would say, for the St. Louis Cardinals.
They'll go up against another middling team, the Houston Astros, starting tonight. So we'll break that all down tomorrow. BK will be back with us. And if you missed anything from our show today, you can check it out on our podcast page at 101ESPN.com. Thanks to our friends at Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. All right, if you are Texter 101 and can tell us what Chicago White Sox player we discussed in our junk drawer segment today, if you could tell me the name of that player in Texter 101, you will win the Cardinals Bud Bash ticket 4-pack tickets to Tuesday night's game against the Pirates. It's the Bud Bash game featuring limited edition Jason Isringhausen bobblehead. Make sure you text in that player's name to 314-399-9646 to win Budweiser Bash tickets for Cardinals versus Pirates on June 11th at Busch Stadium. You can get all the details on the season series of Budweiser Bash Cardinals games now at cardinals.com/promotions. Big thank you to Graham Francis. T-Bone and I will be back with BK tomorrow. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.